All right, here we go. We are live. So, what we're going to do right now is we are going to do a live reaction to MMA Guru's live reaction as well. Not only that, we're also going to talk about a whole bunch of other wide subjects that are going on in the world of MMA. For example, one of them is going to be about Ariel Hawani's move to Yahoo. And I've got some good explanation on that. And by the way, if you're watching this right now, you're in luck for an exclusive because you're going to see this on a video that I'm going to upload sometime in the next few hours or so after this live stream. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to get to it right now. And we're going to get to a whole wide range of different subjects, including MMA Guru uh, inciting violence in the UK, supposedly, or maybe perhaps there's some reality to it. But we're going to get to all that. Also, the news that's going on with the UFC. Obviously, what do we have going on? We have John Jones finally fighting Stipe Miocic. A lot of people are saying that this fight is canceled. And I think the person that is behind all of saying this is Tom Aspinall. And I think with good reason. Now, the reason why Tom Aspinall is doing this is simply because what he's trying to do is create some sort of, how do I say this, diversion of some sort, create some sort of confusion that is going on in the title picture. So, in other words, he's going to create some kind of propaganda that's going to side on his particular favor. In other words, now people are going to call John Jones's punk card, right? We're going to talk more about that, but we're going to talk about the reality of whether Stipe is really hurt or whether he's really going to pull out. What are the realities? What are the fake news behind those rumors? But first and foremost, I'm going to get to the live recording of me doing this reaction to Ariel Hawani moving into Yahoo, and I'm about to explain some sort of historical references in terms of MMA media. And what do I mean by that? Well, so let's start right now. Here's something you guys got to understand, right? In the beginning of the MMA media space, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for people such as Ariel Hawani. Ariel Hawani was a journalist for, I believe, the Syracuse University newspaper, because obviously it was part of his whole degree of going to that college and working on, let's say, papers for the school or writing sports and things of that nature. His first love was basketball, obviously. A big fan of the Knicks, and he'll let you know that right away. We're talking about Ariel Hawani, right? Big fan of the Knicks, but number one love, I think, first and foremost, was and is mixed martial arts. That is his number one love. And as a result of that number one love, he decided to pursue a career in mixed martial arts media coverage that really was not feasible in terms of what he could have made as a basketball journalist. Could he have easily made it and worked for a basketball team, worked for, let's say, TNT Sports, which he's already doing right now on the WWE and the boxing and the UFC side? Yes, those are all possibilities. But the reality of Ariel Hawani getting into this space was not a guarantee during the early 2000s, but he created a lane out of it. And not only that, you also have to understand that back then, if you are a journalist, you get paid a fixed amount for the fact that you work for a newspaper, because you work for a TV company or a TV news network, or maybe perhaps you work for, let's say, a film industry of some sort, right? There's coverage, and not only that, there is guaranteed pay within a fixed price, right? Well, nowadays, that's not a guarantee, because the reason why he left MMA fighting was because of a contractual dispute. And what can I tell you about the contractual dispute? Number one, he wanted more money than what he expected out of what they are offering him. Why is that? Because Ariel Hawani is a guy who literally opened up the lane for MMA media in terms of not only in terms of the mainstream side of things, such as people with Brett Okamoto, uh, what's her name? Uh, I forgot that girl's name. She's the blonde one. You guys know who I'm talking about. But either way, she is a staple of something that Ariel Hawani had helped build, right? Because otherwise, you would just have nothing but fighters, experienced UFC guys that are up there, which, by the way, is what they're doing in the first place, right? They have mostly experienced UFC guys that are up there. But the journalists right now are a dying breed. And the reason for that is for the same reason why you are seeing uh, a conflict within MMA fighting and the contract negotiations they have going on with Ariel Hawani. In other words, what Ariel Hawani doesn't understand is there is an overhead cost that somebody like MMA Guru, somebody like myself, somebody like MMA Joey, somebody like MMA A-Holes, somebody like Boxing Ego, somebody like Zayn Musa Boxing, all these guys, they don't have to pay anybody absolutely anything for their production because they are the one man production. Now, if you work for a media conglomerate, yes, you're going to have a certain amount of views. Yes, you are going to garner a certain amount of audience and garner a large population sample of attention. But the reality is that you're going to have to pay the people that are doing the lights. You're going to have to pay the people that are doing the cameras. You're going to have to pay the people that are doing the production behind the scenes that can do things like this, do this and that. And if you're not watching the live portion of this right now with the MMA Guru Incites Riots in the UK live stream, what I'm doing right now is literally shifting back screens back and forth. And you can see that in the live stream, but you're not seeing that in the live video, or I'm sorry, the video recording of this right now. But if you are in the live stream, look, you see me flipping these screens like this. This is free for me to do. This is absolutely free for me to do. Okay. But if you had a production team behind you, you would have to pay them just to do things like that. So the overhead cost is a lot, right? So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the YouTubers are beating out the mainstream media people. And that's just the reality of it because it's low production. And not only that, it's in high demand. So I want you to remember this, the business aspect of this, right? Because everything is about supply and demand. And what is the demand here? The demand is constant content for MMA and various opinions and subjective opinions, to be quite frank. But not only that, really just a world of entertainment that mainstream news may not be able to offer or try to offer, but comes off as really fake. So this is what Ariel Hawani has to contend with. Now with Yahoo, let's answer the next question. Why is he with Yahoo? Well, the question is, why not? Obviously, Yahoo is a mainstream media company. Ariel Hawani is going to go with them because they're going to offer him mainstream media money as a result of that. And these other companies, such as MMA Fighting, all these other MMA websites, they just don't see the benefits of having somebody like Ariel Hawani on their team when they have to pay all these overhead costs and it doesn't justify the price that Ariel Hawani wants. So that is a reality. Why is it that Ariel Hawani can't see what MMA Fighting doesn't see? Why is it that he can't see that? I'll tell you why. Because, like I said from the beginning of this video and this live stream, depending on when you're watching this, because if you're watching this on live stream right now, you are in an exclusive of watching me record a live video. So, for those that are in the live video right now, I got to ask you, what is it that Ariel Hawani doesn't see that MMA fighting sees? I'll tell you what it is. Ariel Hawani thinks he's a bigger star than what he is because in the beginning of the stream, I said that he is the co founder of this space of MMA media. Whether it is YouTube media or whether it is mainstream media, he encompasses both lanes, Ariel Hawani. So, therefore, his request of his salary is way higher and inflated than the realities of having to pay the overhead cost. Whereas where you have YouTubers such as myself, MMA Guru, and the list goes on with the other names that I had mentioned, shout outs to all of them, the overhead cost literally costs almost nothing. And we collect all the revenue with whatever views that we get out of our content. And that's the reality of the situation. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to continue this live stream, and this is the end point of where I just recorded this video right now. So like and subscribe. Check out the live stream as well that is attached to this video. I'll see you guys on the next one. See you guys on the next one. Inshallah. So there it is. I just recorded a video right now, and now I am staying on live stream, and I'm going to upload that video as I am doing this live stream with you guys right now. So MMA Guru, right? I told you guys from the very beginning that MMA Guru has some issues with the UK government, in particular due to the fact that he is sort of a provocateur online, right? He sort of pokes fun at Muslims in any way that he can, but on the same light, he sort of gives respect to Muslims. But at the same time, I think that there is some flaws to his argument. For example, I understand that there is a crisis going on with the stabbings right now today. They've already had another stabbing in Sheffield, England, right? And then the day before that, they had a stabbing in Germany. So all of these things, you got to understand, are understandable in the mind of most English people, right? But the problem is there is a misdirected effort in who they're trying to target. And that is a problem in and of itself. So let's go back to the beginning of the stabbings in Southport in England, right? What had happened? Well, for one, it was a black UK immigrant. He wasn't a migrant. He wasn't illegal. He was there illegally, but he came from another country. Nonetheless, he wasn't even a Muslim, right? Nobody can confirm that this guy was a Muslim. So because a black non-Muslim attacked a girl, or a group of girls that were in, I don't know what they were doing, some sort of birthday party, or I don't know what the circumstances was behind that. But nonetheless, innocent people, nonetheless, okay? And what do these white hooligans in the UK do as a result of that? They go and basically attack random Pakistanis, random Muslims, which basically is nothing more than a xenophobic response, right? Very misdirected because they didn't go after the person that facilitated the guy that did all the stabbings. They didn't go after the people that may have harbored him, or, I mean, for all it's worth, he was probably a lone wolf. But nonetheless, there's a serious problem with that issue, with that particular issue, right? One of the problems with this particular riot is, once again, it's misdirected. Think about it. Black English guy, non-Muslim, does this stabbing, and as a result, they crash out on people that had nothing to do with the whole entire effect. And of course, as a result, the UK government sent MMA Guru a letter. Uh, in my opinion, do I think that he's responsible for it? No. No, I don't think that he is, but I also think that there is an element of the UK government that is always looking to place blame. For example, they did it with this guy named Andrew Chaudhry. Andrew Chaudhry supposedly is responsible for recruiting a lot of people into the Taliban and ISIS, right? At the time when the Taliban was sort of on the rise and wasn't a forming government that they are now. And even in the time of ISIS at their prominence 10 years ago, to be exact. So as a result of that, uh, well, there's no, I don't know if there's any proof that Andrew Chaudhry is this guy or anything like that, but they definitely cracked down on him to where I believe they now gave him some sort of life sentence of some sort. Now, I'm not sure what the reality of that is, but let's take a look at Andrew Chaudhry just to kind of give you guys some context here. So apparently, he is jailed for life, and this is confirmed about 1 month ago from the BBC. So we have right here Andrew jailed for life. Okay, so this is the reality of what could happen to you if you are blamed for something in the UK. And obviously, MMA Guru will probably be no different in that light, right? So Andrew Chaudhry, the leader of the banned group Al-Mujahideen, has been jailed for life and may never leave prison alive. Wow. Extremist preacher was found guilty of directing the group, which is banned under the UK terror laws, and encouraging support for it, though online meetings. Though it was for online meetings. Okay, so the sentence means he cannot seek to leave jail on a license until he is more than 85 years old. Wow. Chaudhry appeared shocked and rocked on his feet in the dock as he was given a minimum of 28 years at the Woolwich Crown Court. He was convicted last week of directing a terror organization after a complex operation involving detectives and investigators in the US, Canada, and the UK. Wow, a complex operation. That's okay. So Mr. Justice Wall said that Chaudhry's group was a radical organization that intended to spread Sharia law by violent means to as much of the world as possible. So Chaudhry radicalized 2001 America. Okay, emerged in the 1990s. The 57 years old is in prison to attempts of developing. Okay, so normalize violence as much as you normalize violence in a pursuit of ideological cause, said the judge. Okay, so these are some things you got to understand in theory that they can, try and charge MMA Guru for, right? Because if they can do it to him, they can definitely do it to MMA Guru as well, right? So even Tommy Robinson, I'm surprised Tommy Robinson has not the danger you pose in your organizational skills and your skills as an orator rather than as a man who uses violence personally. Okay, so this is according to the judge. Let's see what this is right here.
Meet the tiniest HR team in the world.
What do you think Paylocity does?
Paylocity? I never heard that before. Ooh. I think they pay people. I don't know. Pay people money.
Okay, let's wait for the advertisement because obviously, so Chaudhry's co-accused Canadian Khalid Hussein was convicted of being a member of Al-Mujahideen in jail for 5 years with additional year of supervision license after his release. Okay, so let's take a look at this right here.
So I think this should be clear as well, that there's nothing there in the present tense whatsoever, and that supports my contention that I'm not a member of any group. I'm not supporting any group. I'm not instigating support.
So he's saying here, I'm not sure if he's talking to the judge or the interrogator. I would assume this is the okay, this is a police interview. He's saying he's not instigating any group or anything like that. So
The wording of the
wording directing or
directing
any group.
any group or organization. You know, we're talking whatever existed in the past, and there's absolutely nothing at the moment in any of this.
Okay, but you do talk in the present tense. So I'm telling you that huge vehicle that we have, that's present tense. That's why the Sheikh used to say, whenever it is he mentioned me, he said it was support you and support me at the same time, and he'll give me. You do talk in the present tense there. I concede that previously, yes, you do talk in the past tense.
So in other words, what the interrogator is trying to do right there is give him a lining of questioning as to what his intention was of whatever it is that he's asking him. So,
well, look at the impact we had in Belgium, Holland, in Finland, in Estonia, past tense. So I'm telling you that huge vehicle that we have, that implies to me that it is still ongoing.
No. This is talking about profile. It's clear.
And MMA Guru right now is talking about KSI, about how he has hair transplant issues or something, about that it has nothing to do with, I don't know, I guess black people are least likely to do it or this and that. I don't know. But you know how he is going on about with his whole entire racial tirade and whatnot. But yeah, so just to kind of give you a context of what's going on with MMA Guru, that is sort of the reality of what is going on in the UK right now. Now, look, I'm not here to support one side or another. I want to make that very clear. But I also want you to understand that both sides, whether you are Tommy Robinson or whether you are Anjem Chaudhry or MMA Guru, depending on what spectrum he sort of falls under of that. And I'm going to explain why I say that, right? Because interestingly enough, the one thing that I think is really intriguing about MMA Guru is he is, believe it or not, pro-Palestinian. Primarily because he stands against certain people that have an agenda in the world. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But I just thought that was interesting to bring up. So unlike Tommy Robinson, on the other hand, he has ties to the United States. And not only that, he's got deep ties with Israel. Not so much of the government, but within the support system of, let's say, Israel for the UK or Jews for the UK or things of that nature. Yeah, that's where Tommy Robinson's alliance lies in that. So whatever side you are on, I'm going to make it very clear. I think that the government can misconstrue, misunderstand, and can use anything against you in the court of law. And what I just showed you with Anjem Chaudhry right now is a clear example of that. So let's read this last part of the article right here. So this one states, Chaudhry's co-accused Canadian Khalid Hussein, who was convicted of being a member of Al-Mujahideen, was jailed for 5 years with an additional year of supervision license after his release. Earlier in the hearing, Paul Haynes, KC for Chaudhry, argued that whatever the jury's verdict, Al-Mujahideen was nothing like Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State. We are left with dense theological lectures which are not particularly accessible, he said. We do not see that the court is in a position to conclude that Mr. Chaudhry was gathering the masses. It was a failed organization. Okay, so that is basically the plea of the defendant in this case. So again, very interesting stuff, guys. This is why you have to be very careful about what you say, what you do, and things of that nature. So I'm going to play you guys an old video of mine, right? While I go and upload this video, I'm going to play you guys a video that I had regarding Tommy Robinson and what's his name? And Conor McGregor. Or you know what? As a matter of fact, let's play this very popular video that I have of Conor McGregor and Donald Trump real quick while I upload this video. Right? He wouldn't like you for that reason. So Conor McGregor goes after Donald Trump because Donald Trump flat out said that his favorite fighter is Khabib. Conor McGregor, if Tupac Shakur was alive, he wouldn't like you, Mr. Notorious Conor McGregor, right? He wouldn't like you for that reason alone because it seems that your favorite rapper is Biggie. Now, keep in mind, I have seen Conor McGregor do training videos and ride around in Santa Monica and Venice Beach playing Tupac in his car. So what does that tell you? That tells you that perhaps maybe Biggie is his favorite rapper, but it doesn't mean that you don't like Tupac as well. In fact, there's a lot of people that like Biggie, but also like Pac. There are people who like Tupac, but also like Biggie. And then, of course, there are people who have one side of that argument, meaning that they only support Tupac and not Biggie, or the other way around. Why? Maybe perhaps because of regional ties. That could be one reason. But Conor McGregor is not an American. He doesn't live in the East or West Coast, doesn't represent any of it. So therefore, he would be in the right to support two guys, which brings me to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is allowed to like Khabib as much as he is allowed to like Conor McGregor. In fact, me personally, I'm Team Khabib all the way. There's no doubt about that. I'm not going to hide that in any capacity. But guess what? I also like Conor McGregor. I also enjoy his content. I also enjoy his fights. I also enjoy him getting on the mic and the appearances that he makes in BKFC. And on top of the catalog that he's built up in the UFC in the past decade. I love all of that because I'm a true MMA fan. Now, it doesn't mean that Donald Trump doesn't like Conor McGregor either. I'm sure he does. If you're a fight fan, you're going to like Conor McGregor and Khabib for various reasons. If you are a hip-hop fan, for the most part, you're going to like Biggie and Tupac, unless, of course, you have no regional affiliations with any of those two, nor do you have a circumference of being part of that era. In other words, you're too young to really have a say or have an opinion on the matter. But Donald Trump has the right to like Khabib. But you got to understand something. The fight game is full of people that come from honor cultures. In other words, the minute you insult me, I'm going to get back at you and insult you straight away. The minute that you stand against me, I'm going to stand against you in a way that is going to be disrespectful, that is going to be very demeaning, and to the point of undermining everything that you do. So this is the reality of combat sports, its athletes, and people that live that type of life. And when I mean that type of life, I don't just mean being a fighter or being a gangster or anything like that. It's all of the above. It's an honor culture. So this is why Conor McGregor said to Donald Trump, man, elections is coming up. This is going to somehow affect you in a negative way. As if people who really care about the subject of America and its future are going to predicate their vote based on a candidate's choice of fighters that they like in the UFC. But that is the mind of Conor McGregor. That is how he feels about this particular subject. And I got to be honest with you. I think you're wrong. And the reason being is because, well, obviously you're biased because you have an enemy in Khabib, and you're going to be determined to deter him in any kind of capacity. And literally laugh at his downfall, which is what's going on right now with the Russian tax scandal going on with Khabib. As you've seen, Conor McGregor made references to that, saying that, oh, well, he's a terrorist, he's housed these types of people, saying something to the effect of, well, why is it that his father was not able to come to the United States? And that's a good point. But does it have anything to do with terrorism? The reality is we don't know. However, it is an important question to ask. Conor throws it out there, and it is a good question because we don't really know. But he's going to make assumptions. He's going to make accusations that's going to fit the narrative and the agenda that he is trying to fit the puzzle into. Meaning that, okay, you know what? Maybe this guy really is part of a terrorist organization. But we don't know that. Because if he was, then the Russians would, come hell or high water, go after Khabib and arrest him. They didn't do that. All they had problems with Khabib was the tax issues. And the fact that he chose to become a citizen of the UAE, to which he now has no taxes in the money that he makes, right? So I don't know if any of that is related, and we don't know, but understand this. Let's talk about politics for a second. I think Conor McGregor, I'm sorry, I meant Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump did the right thing by saying that in a political matter. Let me explain to you why. Right now, the left is losing Muslim supporters. The Democrats are losing Muslim supporters. And that's for several reasons. Some of the reasons is because of the curriculum that you teach in American schools that is absolutely contrasting of Islamic values. So as a result, Muslim Americans, who, by the way, many of them are Khabib fans, are going to look to Donald Trump. And for Donald Trump to say that Khabib is his favorite fighter, I got to be honest with you, that's going to solidify votes for the Muslim population. And here's another thing that you have to understand. Many Muslims don't go and vote, and I can explain to you right now why. For one, the reason why many Muslims don't vote is because they believe that it is kuffar, it is the way of the disbeliever, that we only allow Allah to legislate our laws and not man. So participating in such is committing a sin against the methods of Tawheed, monotheism. That's how deep it goes. But there are a lot of Muslims that are not versed in these particular matters. They don't really understand a lot of the Islamic doctrines and the rules and the reasons behind these rules. So many of them are going to do exactly what everybody else does, which is vote. And by Donald Trump doing that, it only creates a better relationship with him in the Muslim community, considering that back in 2016, he's said some many horrible comments about Muslims and Mexicans as well regarding the border issues and whatnot. So you got to understand, he has to campaign like most politicians. He has to make himself look good. But also, you got to understand, Donald Trump shoots from the hip, says what he wants, and says what he feels. So if he feels that Khabib is the greatest fighter ever, and that is his favorite guy, well, he has the right to do that as a mixed martial arts fan. Yes, he's a former president who's he has the right to choose who his favorite fighter is. And let me address this lastly. You want to know why Khabib is his favorite fighter? It goes back to Colby Covington, and no, it has nothing to do with the style of wrestling. It has more to do with the aspect of the fact that he wins. So how does Colby Covington relate to this? Look at the Colby Covington-Leon Edwards fight, how he lost to Leon Edwards. What happened? Trump left before Colby could even get on the mic and make a post-fight speech, which, by the way, they normally don't give to the losers of the fight, but rather only if, let's say, they went to a decision or if they are the main event. And in this case, he got on the mic, but Donald Trump left. He wasn't hearing any of it. He's like, you lost. I'm only here for the winners. And that's just how Donald Trump's personality is. Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, is the type of guy that will only roll with the winners and will disregard the losers, because he is the same guy that said to John McCain, I like the people that get captured. I like the people that don't get captured, not the ones that do. As if being a POW is somehow a failure to your military career, but that's how Donald Trump views the world. Winners and losers. And you can't deny that Khabib is the biggest winner of them all. Sure, is Conor more rich than Khabib? Yes. But legacy-wise, who has the better portfolio and resume? You can argue Conor does, based on the fact that he knocked Aldo out in 13 seconds. You can argue that McGregor has had more meaningful fights and meaningful rematches in ways that Khabib hasn't. But by the end of the day, they both already fought each other. And what was the result of that? 4th round submission to Khabib, where many people cite Conor McGregor as quitting. But by the end of it, Conor somehow was able to twist that whole entire fight as to say, hey, you know what? I got the last blow of the fight, of the night. Why? Because obviously there was a riot that ensued. All of Khabib's guys went in the cage, jumped him, beat him up, but then he also got some licks in there as well, where he did punch Zubaira, from what I remember. Either way, Conor is so good at creating narratives for himself. He lost the fight. No one in history I have ever seen lose a fight yet look like the winner or the person that is close to the winner at any capacity in the way Conor McGregor did for the Khabib fight until this day. He still uses any narrative or any type of blowback he can push towards Khabib to make him look bad, just to distract people from the reality that he got choked in the 4th round and literally gave up against Khabib. Now, why do I say give up? Well, let's talk technical for a second. What he got on Conor was nothing more than a crank. And for those guys who train jiu-jitsu, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know the difference between a clear choke and a crank. And the way that Khabib had his biceps wrapped around the chin of Conor, well, that's classified as a crank, not a choke. If you got a rear naked right underneath the neck and you got the bicep underneath there and you got it squeezed with both your hands clapped together while you're choking, that's a choke, okay? Once it hits your throat. He didn't do that. So therefore, a lot of people cite the idea that Khabib made him quit because he could have fought out or at least tried to push his arm out against Khabib, but maybe perhaps Khabib's overwhelming pace really tested Conor McGregor's cardio, to which he wasn't able to keep up against that level of intensity. And therefore, the lactic acid that built up in his arms, he was not able to fight the hands off, because any jiu-jitsu instructor or black belt will tell you, you want to get out of a rear naked choke, you got to have a 2-on-1 position in one of your opponent's hands that's behind you. He didn't do that. He knows that he should have done that, but he couldn't because of the lactic acid that built up in his arms based on the pace that Khabib put on in that fight. And that is the reason why people said that he gave up. But even with that, he managed to create his own narrative for the world. And he still is continuing to do that till this day, while using Donald Trump's current presidential campaign as a way of sort of conveying that message. So Michael Chandler, good old Michael Chandler, fires back at Conor McGregor. He says to him, Donald Trump got more balls than you because of the fact that he got shot, survived, and still the next day he went on to go to his Wisconsin rally or wherever he was supposed to be the next day. Either way, Conor McGregor did not answer the call because of the fact that he had a broken toe. Now, that right there is a separate argument in and of itself. Here's what I'll say to that. What I can say to that is the fact that Conor McGregor is on a losing streak. And he has to be very careful about how he's going to move for his next fight. He has to be very assured. Let's give Conor some credit. He went out there and fought injured plenty of times. Chad Mendes fight, he did very good. Jose Aldo fight, 13 seconds. Khabib, he had a broken toe once again. We saw the result of that as I've talked about it in detail in this video. He wants to go in there 100%. And I think I can understand from an athletic perspective why Conor is doing that. Look at what he did with Donald Cerrone. No injuries. Was ready to go. Healthy. Walked in there. No drinking in his camp. Was just absolutely prepared to the max. Okay? How did he do? 40-second knockout. That's what Conor McGregor is looking to do with Michael Chandler. So therefore, it's hard for us to blame him not taking this fight. And to equate the idea of going into a rally the next day after getting shot at is a little bit different than the competitive nature that is involved in MMA and taking a risk while you're injured. That's the reality of this whole entire video. There's political matters. There's matters that can give you an objective point of view as to what is the right choice to make in times like this where you got to. All right. So if you guys want to check out the rest of that, yeah, check it out on the video catalog. So yes, wanted to talk a little bit about in the last less than 20 minutes that I have. I'm going to get off here at 11, just right around the time that I'm going to debut and premiere my next video with Ariel Helwani being fired by MMAfighting.com and by Yahoo Legacy Media. So I'll tell you what's very interesting about this, right? Obviously, we are shifting our focus from MMA Guru and into Ariel Helwani. Well, in this live stream, we talk about MMA Guru and his possible troubles that he has with the UK government and what is the reality of that. Well, we also have to talk about Ariel Helwani and what he represents as the legacy media. What he represents in legacy media is sort of the old guard and what have you. So, being that it's the old guard, MMA Guru sort of represents the new guard in that effect. So, hold on just a sec. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, that what they both represent is the contrasting aspects of what legacy media is versus the new media right now. Ariel Helwani sort of wants a whole lot more money than what he truly deserves, right? And there's a good reason for that. The reason why he wants more money than what he truly deserves is because he comes from the old guard, and the old guard feels like they are a big contribution to the MMA space. And why is that? Well, look, you got to understand, right? Back in the days when you had Muhammad Ali fights, Joe Frazier fights, and George Foreman fights, Mike Tyson fights, who are the people that was covering these fights? The people that were covering these fights were people that were already assigned from TV networks. Nowadays, when you look at modern MMA and modern boxing, who covers them? The media, yes, the media, first and foremost, HBO, when it was around, Showtime, still around, PBC, The Zone, the new guys on the block. What else? PBC, I had already mentioned them, UFC Fight Pass, because they got their own boxing going on right now. But who else covers it, right? What other media outlets cover it? It is YouTube, the quote unquote bloggers, people with subpar quality to their streams, but yet have a huge following no matter what, right? Again, that right there is a strong reflection in understanding what kind of world we live in today. We're yearning for a second opinion, not just a second opinion. It doesn't even necessarily have to be right. It doesn't have to be correct in any kind of capacity. So imagine that. You don't have to be correct to be watched and to be admired as an important entity in the MMA space. If you have personality, which is something that MMA Guru has a lot of, if you have great knowledge, you had great articulation. That's, yes, something that MMA Guru, Lucas, MMA Tracy Rigo, all these guys, they all have that. So they all are entitled to a space in this MMA coverage. And it's not just the old way anymore. It's not just the old guard. So I thought it's quite an important way of sort of transitioning this live stream into the video premiere that I'm going to have regarding Ariel Hawani and some issues that he had when it came to, let's say, I don't know, re-signing with MMA fighting. So once again, in the modern world, understand this: in the modern world that we live in, you don't have to be correct, okay, in order to have space in the MMA coverage area, right? Or to be an MMA reporter, or to be an MMA blogger or YouTuber. You don't have to be correct. But if you are entertaining enough and you can garner a certain following, that's all that matters. And just like I'm going to transition this last few minutes to Dricus du Plessis, who I believe is the best middleweight of all time. You want to know why? He does a lot of great things, and a lot of those great things are not correct. It's not correct the way that he throws punches. It's not correct the way that he throws kicks. It's not even correct the way that he takes you down. But you know what? It works. It works by the end of the day. And why does it work? Well, simply because he has a certain level of combat fitness that allows him to be able to operate in that type of motion. In other words, like, at some point, both you and your opponent are going to get tired, right? This is where Dricus shines the most. Now, have you seen Izzy look sloppy at the end of, let's say, the Kelvin Gastelum fight? Sure. Why is that? Well, the reason why you saw him look sloppy during those fights was for the simple fact that he was tired. He was put in the ringer against Kelvin Gastelum. And as he was put in a ringer through Kelvin Gastelum, he eventually started building up lactic acid in his arms, in his legs, so he wasn't as elusive. He wasn't able to dodge shots the way that he can in the first round, so his head movement wasn't all there. This right here is where Dricus is really at his most dangerous, because you are equal to him at this point. You see what I'm saying? The equality that you and Drickus have at this particular moment in this particular point of time, I think is the reason why he succeeds with a lot of the fights that he's in. Now, obviously, he does get early finishes as well, but you look at the Izzy fight, it didn't make any sense. You see, Izzy looked great for what it was worth in the time being that he was there. But as time went on, unfortunately, um, Drickus just did not have the gas tank to continue. But guess what? He's used to being in that particular space. He's used to fighting that type of pressure, uh, dealing with, let's say, high heat and high temperatures in a room. Now, all of a sudden, he's fighting tired, but guess what? He's in an air conditioned arena. So, how is he going to operate from here on? A little bit different. Okay. He's going to operate a little bit different, but so what? His opponent will too. But so what? Who is going to be used to that? The so what is why Drickus is the champion. Meaning, so what if he looks sloppy? So what if he does look vulnerable in some moments of the fight? It works for him because once you're tired and once he's tired, he trained for that specific time frame. And once he gets there, and once he gets you there, it is you who's going to be in a hyper disadvantage, not him. He's already been there. You've never been there. You've never been in that situation where you're so tired that, let's say, if you're a technical fighter like Israel Adesanya, you just constantly rely on being in a very relaxing fight. If you fight out of range, man, let me tell you, you can really save yourself a lot of energy, especially if the guy does not know how to close the distance within you. Now, here's another thing we need to talk about with Drickus, right? He has high explosive power. And as a result of that high explosive power, guess what? That is the reason why he is able to close that range and grind you in if you are the taller fighter in Israel Adesanya. And quite frankly, I've never seen anything like this ever before, right? He obviously doesn't have the fancy striking that Anderson Silva and Israel Adesanya had in terms of the division's history and their champions. He wasn't, in my opinion, I don't think he's as well-rounded as George St. Pierre, or at least he is as well-rounded as George St. Pierre, but only within the context of the fact that George St. Pierre did it with crisp and sharp techniques in comparison to Drickus, where his techniques, unfortunately, were just subpar in comparison to GSP, but it works. That is the whole point of this argument. What Drickus is able to do works. And because it works, he's able to win fights. And by the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about? Being able to win fights? At the same time, it's also about entertaining. And this is where Israel Adesanya really shined the most. He was able to entertain the crowd. He was able to come up with dance routines on the fly when he did entrances for his title fights with Robert Whittaker, Marvin Vittori, all these dudes, Jared Cannonier, was an absolute showman. Now, Drickus, on the other hand, a little bit different. Obviously, a whole lot more reserved than Israel Adesanya. Doesn't do much dance routines, doesn't really do any of these things or anything like that. He's just a guy that works and grinds. And I'm going to be honest with you, the majority of the fighters in the world are exactly who Drickus du Plessis is. And what do I mean by that? Well, once in a while, once in a blue moon, we have champions that come like Conor McGregor, Khabib, Israel Adesanya. very big personalities. Because again, you got to remember this is a business by the end of the day, right? It's a very important aspect to have in your career is to have a big personality. But guess what? Sometimes, or most of the times, fighters are plain. Fighters are, I'm not going to say boring, but very reserved. You got to think, right? If you train a certain amount of hours during the day, the type of uh the type of sores and aches that you're going to feel is going to humble you a little bit. Not all fighters, some. Sometimes you walk in a coffee shop, you see somebody acting a fool, you're thinking to yourself, you know what? I want to go hop in and sort of clear out this little crash out session right here, or I don't know, be a hero of some sort, right? And then there are fighters that are just like, they walk in that situation like, this is none of my business. I'm not trying to get shot up today. And then a lot of that attitude comes from the fact that you're just tired and training all day. So obviously, most fighters are not going to be the most interesting people, but once in a while, when they are, and when they come around and they have a personality and they have this type of persona about them that you can market, man, you better believe that that's when it really becomes fun. Not just for himself and his team and the fact that they're winning and the fact that they're getting all these endorsements, but for the whole entire industry. However, we have to sometimes set reality in its place that the plain Jane guy that goes to his work and carries his lunchbox, both metaphorically speaking and literally speaking, sometimes are just really what you need in order to win and in order to get the job done. Right? Like we all love the fancy stuff. We all love the fluff, the fancy fluff, the best way to put it, the fancy fluff of it all, right? But the reality of most fighters and fighting is really a lot more boring than you think. And I'm going to close it off with this in the last 2 minutes, right? Before I play the premiere of my latest video regarding Ariel Hawani. Uh, Sometimes the truth is a lot more boring than fiction. And I don't mean to get anti-conspiratorial on y'all, but sometimes a lot of conspiracy theories are formed because the truth of the matter of, let's say, incompetence, or the fact that, let's say, one person made a mistake, a common mistake, and therefore it should just be taken as that, is just not good enough for, let's say, the creative minds of the world. And again, I don't want to be the person that dismisses conspiracies altogether, but understand sometimes the truth, just like fighting, is a lot more boring than the actual fiction. Just like pro wrestling. Pro wrestling never has a dull moment. Everybody's throwing chairs at each other. Everybody's throwing dollies at each other every week on Monday Night Raw and AEW. Okay. But when it does happen in MMA, when Conor McGregor actually picks up a dolly, whether he was intentionally doing it for clout or not, because I can tell you, he really was arrested. He really did spend a few hours in jail before he got bailed. Okay, all of that is real. It's not like Stone Cold where he got arrested by a bunch of fake cops because he assaulted his boss, which was Vince McMahon. That's not reality. But it does happen. And when it does happen, boy, does it make the fight game even more exciting. So, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. We are just about a couple of minutes away right now from the premiere of my video regarding Ariel Hawani. So I think we have a couple of minutes left before that starts. It is 10:58 right now in the West Coast. So I'm going to take these 2 minutes to sort of give you a bit of a synopsis of what to expect in this upcoming video that is about to premiere. You can either watch it on the channel's premiere section, or you can just watch it right here on live stream. I'm going to play it on both. There's no harm, no foul of playing the video on both because they're both my content by the end of the day. But let me give you a little synopsis. So obviously right here, we ended it with talking about why I think Dricus is probably one of the best middleweights of all time. Obviously debatable. You can debate that amongst Anderson Silva and the prime years of Israel Adesanya before they had even fought. But we also talked about MMA Guru and how he was inciting violence, but also his significance to the MMA space of MMA journalism and MMA YouTube, as opposed to Ariel Hawani, who is what you would consider the old guard of MMA journalism, and why he wanted more money from the company that he had broken off of in MMA fighting, and why he's going into Yahoo right now. I think part of the reason why he's into Yahoo, maybe there is a DAZN component to it. Maybe they are willing to pay him a certain amount of money because they see value in having a legit MMA journalist on their side. Who knows? Or maybe I may talk about all of that in the video that is coming up shortly. This should premiere shortly right now. So let's take a look and see where the how this video is coming along right now. Okay, the video should be ready. Okay, here we go. Guys, like and subscribe. I will now tune you guys into the the video premiere. Right now. Here's something you guys got to understand, right? In the beginning of the MMA media space, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for people such as Ariel Helwani. Ariel Helwani was a journalist for, uh, I believe, the Syracuse University newspaper, because obviously it was part of his whole degree of going to that college and working on, let's say, papers for the school or writing sports and things of that nature. His first love was basketball, obviously. A big fan of the Knicks, and he'll let you know that right away. We're talking about Ariel Helwani, right? Big fan of the Knicks, but number one love, I think first and foremost, was and is mixed martial arts. That is his number one love. And as a result of that number one love, he decided to pursue a career in mixed martial arts media coverage that really was not feasible in terms of what he could have made as a basketball journalist. Could he have easily made it and worked for a basketball team, worked for, let's say, TNT Sports, which he's already doing right now on the WWE and the boxing and the UFC side? Yes, those are all possibilities. But the reality of Ariel Helwani getting into this space was not a guarantee during the early 2000s, but he created a lane out of it. And not only that, you also have to understand that back then, if you were a journalist, you get paid a fixed amount for the fact that you work for a newspaper, because you work for a TV company or a TV news network, or maybe perhaps you work for let's say a film industry of some sort, right? There's coverage, and not only that, there is guaranteed pay within a fixed price, right? Well, nowadays, that's not a guarantee, because the reason why he left MMA fighting was because of a contractual dispute. And what can I tell you about the contractual dispute? Number one, he wanted more money than what he expected out of what they are offering him. Why is that? Because Ariel Helwani is a guy who literally opened up the lane for MMA media in terms of not only in terms of the mainstream side of things, such as people with Brett Okamoto. What's her name? I forgot that girl's name. She's the blonde one. You guys know who I'm talking about. But either way, she is a staple of something that Ariel Helwani had helped build, right? Because otherwise, you would just have nothing but fighters, experienced UFC guys that are up there, which, by the way, is what they're doing in the first place, right? They have mostly experienced UFC guys that are up there. But the journalists right now are a dying breed, and the reason for that is for the same reason why you are seeing a conflict within MMA fighting and the contract negotiations they have going on with Ariel Helwani. In other words, what Ariel Helwani doesn't understand is there is an overhead cost. An overhead cost that somebody like MMA Guru, somebody like myself, somebody like MMA Joey, somebody like MMA A-Holes, somebody like Boxing Ego, somebody like Zayn Musa Boxing, all these guys, they don't have to pay anybody absolutely anything for their production because they are the one-man production. Now, if you work for a media conglomerate, yes, you're going to have a certain amount of views. Yes, you are going to garner a certain amount of audience and garner a large population sample of attention. But the reality is that you're going to have to pay the people that are doing the lights. You're going to have to pay the people that are doing the cameras. You're going to have to pay the people that are doing the production behind the scenes that can do things like this, do this and that. And if you're not watching the live portion of this right now with the MMA Guru Incites Riots in the UK live stream, what I'm doing right now is literally shifting back screens back and forth. And you can see that in the live stream, but you're not seeing that in the live video, or I'm sorry, the video recording of this right now. But if you are in the live stream, look, you see me flipping these screens like this. This is free for me to do. This is absolutely free for me to do. Okay, but if you had a production team behind you, you would have to pay them just to do things like that. So the overhead cost is a lot, right? So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the YouTubers are beating out the mainstream media people. And that's just the reality of it. Because it's low production, and not only that, it's in high demand. So I want you to remember this, the business aspect of this, right? Because everything is about supply and demand. And what is the demand here? The demand is constant content for MMA and various opinions and subjective opinions, to be quite frank. But not only that, really just a world of entertainment that mainstream news may not be able to offer or try to offer, but comes off as really fake. So this is what Ariel Helwani has to contend with. Now with Yahoo, let's answer the next question. Why is he with Yahoo? Well, the question is, why not? Obviously, Yahoo is a mainstream media company. Ariel Helwani is going to go with them because they're going to offer him mainstream media money as a result of that. And these other companies, such as MMA Fighting, all these other MMA websites, they just don't see the benefits of having somebody like Ariel Helwani on their team when they have to pay all these overhead costs, and it doesn't justify the price that Ariel Helwani wants. So that is a reality. Why is it that Ariel Helwani can't see what MMA Fighting doesn't see? Why is it that he can't see that? I'll tell you why. Because like I said, from the beginning of this video and this live stream, depending on when you're watching this, because if you're watching this on live stream right now, you are in an exclusive of watching me record a live video. So for those that are in the live video right now, I got to ask you, what is it that Ariel Helwani doesn't see that MMA Fighting sees? I'll tell you what it is. Ariel Helwani thinks he's a bigger star than what he is, because in the beginning of the stream, I said that He is the co-founder of this space of MMA media, whether it is YouTube media or whether it is mainstream media. He encompasses both lanes, Ariel Hawani. So therefore, his request of his salary is way higher and inflated than the realities of having to pay the overhead cost. Whereas where you have YouTubers such as myself, MMA Guru, and the list goes on with the other names that I had mentioned, shout outs to all of them, the overhead cost literally costs almost nothing. And we collect all the revenue with whatever views that we get out of our content. And that's the reality of the situation. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to continue this live stream. And he wants to have a great fight and implement his game plan and do what he needs to do. He has to leave all of that out of his head, all the guilt, all of this. You know what? Here's the thing with Dricus du Plessis. He needs to go and embrace this. You know what? You think I'm a racist? So what? So be it. Because look at Israel Adesanya right now. He is loose as a goose. Has no care in the world. Doesn't care about what anybody thinks or anything to that effect. But guess what? It's going to help him in this fight. Because whether he believes it or not in his head that Dricus du Plessis is a colonizer, that he's a racist, that he's this and that, whether he truly believes that or not, it's obviously enough for him to be so hyper motivated that, I mean, what can you really say, right? You know what I mean? Like, he's really playing into it. And what I'm trying to say is that Dricus du Plessis is not. He's trying to deviate away from it. He's trying to make this into something else. He's trying to make this about fighting. He's trying to make this about just mixed martial arts in and of itself. But for Israel Adesanya, he's trying to make it more than just mixed martial arts. And maybe sometimes that's really what you need in order for you to succeed in a fight game like this. You need to go out there and make believe that this is more than just a fight. You need to make believe that this is more than just a contest, that it's more than just that. It is the absolute life and death situation of whatever it is that you're motivated by. And if that helps you, that helps you. But for some other people, it just doesn't help them. They're just nonchalant about everything, like Alex Pereira. Everything to him is just like, whatever. I'm in a roller coaster ride, whatever. I'm just going to keep my face straight. I won the championship. Great. I'm just going to act the way that I do. And that's it. That's just what, I mean, bottom line, I think you guys have to understand that this is more than just a fight. And I think that a lot of people outside of the mixed martial arts world is definitely going to eat this whole fight up. Because guess what? This is just what casuals are attracted to. They're attracted to fights like this. All right. So, as you are joining me right now, I think you already know that this fight is already signed for August 2024, somewhere in Perth, Australia. As a matter of fact, the same location that I believe the last UFC Australia was located at. So, I got to tell you, the history of this particular fight, it is going to be massive. And I'm going to tell you why. You have to understand that one of the biggest attractions in combat sports is literally, I hate to say it, but racial implications. You see that in boxing, You see that also in MMA as of late. Now, what's really interesting is all throughout the history of mixed martial arts, it's never really been about race, ever. And I think there's a good reason for that. For one, I've always mentioned and said over and over again that Conor McGregor was responsible for truly bringing an urban hip hop audience to the mainstream mixed martial arts world. And prior to that, I had said that there's a certain demographics that dominated mixed martial arts. You look at back in the days, who was dominating the scene? It was Matt Hughes. It was people that looked like Matt Hughes. It was George St. Pierre, who sort of has a bit of a hip hop influence in his life, right? But he wasn't truly embraced by the urban black culture, at least not in America, perhaps maybe in Canada, perhaps maybe in Europe. But with America, there's just a different flavor that we have in the urban community in America. And quite frankly, Israel Adesanya really fits the bill in that aspect. And I'm going to tell you why. For one, on his rise, Israel Adesanya has done media tours when it comes to, let's say, Complex, when it comes to hip hop sites, and really embraced the American culture in the urban settings to the point where, quite honestly, he was accepted to the point where a lot of people may have thought that this guy was from here, but he's not, which is interesting. And by the way, this makes the fight even more interesting simply because you have Israel Adesanya, who's of Nigerian descent. And this is where really the controversy of this entire fight is happening. And now it just so happens that the way that things aligned, Israel Adesanya is now a number one contender, even though he had lost to Sean Strickland. And we're going to talk about that as well, how this fight went about. And Dricus du Plessis happens to have done something that Israel Adesanya wasn't able to do, which was beat Sean Strickland. Now, you're probably wondering, why did I name this the title that I did, right? Obviously, the title reads Izzy versus Dricus. UFC's most racist fight has been signed, UFC 305 Perth. And then I wrote South African History X. Well, I figured Sean Strickland is part of this whole entire story, even though he's not in this fight. And if you want to add Sean Strickland into it, obviously there's racial implications with Sean Strickland as well, considering that the man was a former neo-Nazi affiliated with Peckerwood gangs down in LA. And Sean Strickland, quite frankly, with the way that he turned his life around, I think has a very similar story to the Edward Norton character that was played in the movie American History X. So once again, this is why I decided to name that particular parentheses South African History X, even though Sean Strickland has very little to do with this fight. However, a very significant character that is the missing piece to this entire thing. Because after all, that fight with him and Dricus du Plessis was very close. Very close. And a lot of people would have argued and said that perhaps maybe Sean Strickland won that fight. Nonetheless, he didn't. So therefore, what do we have in the process? What we have in the process is Dricus du Plessis fighting Israel Adesanya as a result of that particular contest back in January in Toronto. So here we are. We have this fight, right? Israel Adesanya, what is very interesting about him as I was going on about how he's highly accepted into the urban black culture of America. What is interesting about him? He's not from America. He's from Australia. He's also of Nigerian descent. However, the fight and the controversy that goes on with this is Dricus du Plessis one time saying in between his career in the UFC had mentioned, I'm the real African fighter here. Francis Ngannou lives in France. Kamaru Usman represents the United States. That's the reason why Kamaru Usman is a great wrestler, because he grew up in a state that predominantly is a culture of wrestling, which is Nebraska. So it is the reason why He is who he is in that particular aspect. So now you also have Israel Adesanya, who's also of African descent, but doesn't live in Africa the way that Dricus du Plessis has. Now, Kamaru Usman fired back at Dricus, saying, you know what? You have to give respect to people that have come before you. So, in other words, he's saying, in full translation of that language of Kamaru Usman's statement, you're not African. You live in the continent of Africa, but just like what Israel Adesanya had said to him in this face-off, in this particular picture that you're looking at, that I edited for your viewing pleasure, he said to him, if you tested my DNA, you would know where I'm from and you would know where you're from. Obviously, we know this. We know the history of the Dutch, the French, and the Europeans that have came and colonized South Africa. So we know this. But we also have to be fair and put it in perspective that people like Dricus du Plessis, even though that they had benefited from the apartheid, we also have to understand that they are not solely responsible for the tragedies that have happened in that country, and in turn may have little to do with the contribution of these oppression and these particular um unfair unfair aspects that really, come into his life as opposed to the life of the native Africans in that region. So now here we are with this particular fight. This is the reason why these two are fighting, and they just so happen to be some of the top 185 fighters in the world. Now, I got to tell you, on the MMA side of things, I've told you guys from the very beginning that 185 pounds is one of the most stacked divisions there is. And by the way, I made a video of that, and you can see on the video section of me explaining that to people. And I've gotten comments and messages from people saying, well, you're capping, you're lying. The 185 division isn't the best division. And let me tell you why a lot of people were saying that. The reason why a lot of people were saying that the 185 division is not as stacked as the other divisions in the UFC was because Israel Adesanya was dominating that entire division for a very, very long time. And whenever you have a dominant champion, it just makes the entire division look weak. On top of that, Israel Adesanya is not to be a known wrestler. He doesn't use or implement wrestling. So, to the naked eye of a lot of casual observers and even hardcores, they're looking at it like he's an incomplete fighter. He's just a striker, longtime kickboxer, and he's winning these fights based on that one skill alone, as opposed to using the other compository sports in mixed martial arts. So, in turn, they said that this division looks weak. Now, all of a sudden, Alex Pereira defeats Israel Adesanya a few times, right? And this is where the entire story goes, as we are basically looking at UFC 305, where this particular fight is going to take place, right? Which is where? In Perth, Australia. But how did we get here? How did we get here with Dricus du Plessis as the world champion and Israel Adesanya as a contender? Now, if you remember back in June, or I'm sorry, during the summertime, this is the reality of this particular fight right here. Israel Adesanya, the defending champion, supposedly supposed to fight Dricus du Plessis originally, which was supposed to take place in Sydney, Australia. But as a result, after the Alex Pereira fight, the series that he had going on with him, Alex Pereira knocks him out, continues his streak of winning against Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya settles the score, knocks him out, as you can see in the middle part of the picture. And then here we are. UFC 293 was supposed to be Israel Adesanya versus your boy right here, Dricus du Plessis. But what had happened with Dricus du Plessis as a result? He said, I'm not going to fight this guy. Why? Because the turnaround was too soon. Even though he really left that fight against Robert Whittaker unscathed. But for whatever reason he had, he just decided, hey, you know what? I'm not going to go and take this fight. So fast forward to September 9th, 2023. Sean Strickland ends up winning that fight. Okay, makes a great account of himself. And to a lot of people's surprise, they were like, I cannot believe this. I cannot believe that Sean Strickland was able to get the win in here. But he did. And once again, it ruined the plans of the UFC. After that fight, Israel Adesanya had decided, you know what? I'm going to hang it up. Reason being, the guy just really had an insane active record. He was just constantly active, constantly fighting, one fight after another, one fight after another. So some of the most busiest schedule that you can find in the history of the UFC as a world champion. Really, one of the most busiest schedules for a UFC champion. Now, let's take a look at his particular history when I'm talking about how he is the most busiest champion literally of all time. Okay? Let's take a look at all these pay-per-view bouts that Israel Adesanya was a part of. Okay? This is the pay-per-views that he has produced over the years. Anderson Silva, starting from 2019. Then Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, where they basically unified the world championships, which I believe was long overdue, considering that Robert Whittaker was already crowned the champion after George St. Pierre had dropped the belts. And then right afterwards, it was Adesanya and Romero. Why did he decide to take that fight? Because nobody wanted to take that fight with Israel Adesanya. I'm sorry, with with Yoel Romero. Nobody wanted to take that fight for one reason or another. Costa, Abu Dhabi, in front of an empty crowd. And Israel Adesanya says something to the effect of, I'm going to fight this guy in front of billionaires in an empty arena. And exactly, he did that. After that, Blachowicz goes for the UFC 205 belt. Unfortunately, falls short in that 5-round affair, right? And obviously credit to Alex Pereira, even with the up and down roller coaster career he's had in the UFC, he managed to win both belts that Israel Adesanya could not have been able to do, even though Israel Adesanya has a win over him. After that, he goes back and concentrates on 185, and then he just continues on and on from there. Vittori, Whittaker, Cannonier, and then Pereira again. After that, Pereira and Adesanya gets his revenge in Miami in front of Donald Trump, just like Dricus du Plessis won his fight in front of Donald Trump against Robert Whittaker back in the summer. And then here we are with Sean Strickland getting defeated, losing his belt, decides to take a long overdue break, which again, he quite frankly deserved because of the activity that he's had. I mean, I just showed you his activity level on that end, right? And the pay-per-views that he's headlined. Okay, one after another. March of 2020, September of 2020, March of 2021, June of 2021, February of 2022, July of 2022, November of 2022, April of 2023. And then here we are right here in this picture, September 10th, 2023, in his home country of Australia. Obviously not his home. Well, okay, Australia is not really part of New Zealand, but you get the picture. So right after that fight, what happens? Now Sean Strickland becomes the unlikely world champion of the world. And by the way, this is one of the greatest moments that you can really expect out of mixed martial arts when you have situations like this. Why? Because Sean Strickland is an unlikely champion. He's not very corporate. He's not, how I would say this, mainstream friendly. He's sort of like a Stone Cold Steve Austin character, which makes him quite interesting and gives Sean Strickland a different type of superstardom that the conventional stars of the UFC don't have. Obviously, Conor McGregor is in his own lane. Israel Adesanya is in his own lane, but mainstream friendly. Because I had mentioned earlier in this content that Israel Adesanya really fits the bill of the hip hop urban culture. So here we are in Toronto, and guess what? Sean Strickland gets pressed by what? By his views on certain things on a particular community that I'm not going to mention, because if you do, then YouTube is going to ban you for it. But you get the picture and you know the story. And if you're a hardcore fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you don't, well, I urge you to go online on Google and look up all the controversies that were surrounding Sean Strickland before this fight on January 20th of this year, and also during this fight week of January 20th, 2024. All the controversies that had gone on. And speaking of controversy, the result of this fight was controversial in and of itself, but at the same time, it gave us exactly what it is that we needed, which was what? A real controversial fight between Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis, because quite frankly, Israel Adesanya dropped the ball, taking that risk against Sean Strickland, but credit to him for allowing Sean Strickland to get an opportunity to build Sean Strickland into the star that he is today. And not only that, really gave an opportunity to a man that nobody would have ever expected to win. But here we are. Now Strickland is taking on du Plessis. And what happens? Controversial decision. Du Plessis wins this fight. Real controversial, right? You could have had this fight either way. It was virtually identical. Now, for me, I had thought that Dricus du Plessis won this fight based on his wrestling alone. I honestly believe that wrestling wins fights. And Sean Strickland didn't have that particular aspect in his game, as opposed to Dricus du Plessis, who had that in his particular game and was able to win as a result by winning by points slightly. And again, if you wanted to score that for Sean Strickland, I'm not mad at it either, because if you watch it for the second time, you can make arguments with that. But I'm not going to argue the decision by the judges that night, because they have a very hard job. They have to pick a winner. And when you have a close, tight fight like this, you got to give it to somebody, and nobody's going to be satisfied either way. Not the fans of Sean Strickland and not the fans of Dricus du Plessis if it had gone the other way. That's just the nature of the beast. Nonetheless, it was a gift in and of itself, because even though the roles are reversed with Israel Adesanya as a contender and Dricus du Plessis as the champion, we have ourselves a very important fight that could be very historic in terms of racial implications, which is very big in the world of combat sports, and it always has been. I mean, you want to look at the neo-Nazi past of Sean Strickland. Let's talk about the real Nazis, right? How about Max Schmeling when he took on Joe Louis? Okay, that was a very controversial fight. It was a very big boxing fight at the time, because here you have Max Schmeling, who is represented by the the Nazi Germany. Sorry, not neo-Nazi. Obviously, neo means new. So all the Nazi and Peckerwood gangs that you would probably see in LA and elsewhere, yeah, that's why they're neo, because they don't have a country. They're basically an insurgent group that runs as a gang. But either way, that was a great and controversial fight, because you have a Black American in Joe Louis, who himself is trying to find some sort of acceptance in his own country. Very similar to Israel Adesanya, who was also trying to find acceptance in his own country. Because remember, living in New Zealand as the only Black kid, one of the few Black kids in that particular region of the world, you got to think the type of fights and the type of bullying that Israel Adesanya has experienced. And by the way, he'll even tell you himself, as a result of the bullying that Israel Adesanya had experienced, he even mentions and sort of hints at the idea that, you know what, when he was living there, all the bullying that he had experienced really motivated him into being the man that he is today. But guess what? A lot of the experiences that Dricus du Plessis has had also made him the man that he is today. And by the way, before I get into Dricus du Plessis' history and the victory that he had after the Sean Strickland title fight win, I want to mention that Israel Adesanya really has a spiteful nature to him, which I think is going to be very interesting leading up to this fight. Very, very, very spiteful personality. Because I remember Israel Adesanya, he said something to the extent that I keep all of my old school bullies from back in the days on my social media page. I follow them, I befriend them. And he said the reason why, get this, is because I want to see them do bad while I'm here doing good. That man right there is extremely spiteful. And guess what? It translates into his fighting style. And not only that, you obviously seen that when he knocked out Alex Pereira right here. He's doing the arrow sign because guess what? This is the quintessential trademark of Alex Poetan. He likes to shoot arrows at you as sort of his trademark deal, sort of giving homage to his native culture down in Brazil, right? And obviously, Israel Adesanya used that to mock him, just like Israel Adesanya had used his social media to mock his old bullies, saying something to the effect, well, now you guys are fat, you're old, you have kids, you got gray hair, you got a receding hairline, and here I am looking all fresh. I'm the world champion, and you're an absolute nothing. So Israel Adesanya loves that. He loves this kind of thing. But guess what? Here's another thing about Dricus du Plessis. He also loves this. He also loves being spiteful. He loves to celebrate in front of you and let you know what's up. Because, by the way, let's fast forward this a little bit. He's had a history of that. So let me introduce you to one of the biggest fights that he's had against Yannick Bahati. Now, what is significant about this fight? Well, I got to tell you, this particular fight, before Dricus du Plessis was celebrated by all of South Africa as being their first ever South African champion. And by the way, let me be very clear. I'm talking about the domestic country of South Africa being the first South African champion, not the first African champion overall. Because obviously, with the controversy that surrounds this fight, Usman and Francis Ngannou would beg to differ, and even Israel Adesanya would beg to differ as to say that he is the first African champion. Now, here's the thing about this, to sort of play advocate on the side of Dricus du Plessis. When he means that he is the first African champion, he really means a resident of South Africa. Because guess what? Look at this picture. Where is this taking place? This is probably in the Johannesburg International Airport after he had defeated Sean Strickland, flying from Canada to South Africa. Okay? He flew into South Africa. When Francis Ngannou won the belt, where did he go home? He went down the street because the fight was in Vegas and the fight was in the Apex Center. And Francis Ngannou has a house in Las Vegas. So guess what? He didn't take a 20-hour flight the way that Dricus du Plessis had to go back to his home country. Francis Ngannou drove down the street to his beautiful home of Las Vegas, Nevada, in the same place that he won the title. And that is the argument that Dricus du Plessis has going on. So, again, fast forward to this fight. And by the way, a very decorated career in Dricus du Plessis. Let me explain to you the type of decorated career that he had, okay? He started out as a middleweight. Obviously, his first fight, he was a middleweight from the very beginning, but I think he started out as a welterweight in his Muay Thai career, okay? In that debut, he went in July of 2013. So now he is literally 11 years deep in the game. Okay. And then after that, he fought middleweight up until he fought Dino in June of 2015. And by the way, EFC is a very big regional organization down in South Africa, right? Very big organization. He was a champion in that particular organization. Not only was he a champion in that particular organization, he was also a champion in KSW. And he was a double champion in EFC. Think about that. A double champion in EFC. Okay, so this is the history that Dricus has had for a very long time. He was a double champion. And after he became the double champion, what had happened? He went on to the UFC. Okay, and then after he became the KSW champion at welterweight at KSW, so he won titles on both classes and in two different organizations. So after he had defended the EFC belt in December of 2019, he then goes on and makes his UFC debut at October 11th, 2020, which, by the way, was during the pandemic. And then he had a fight against Darren Till, Derek Brunson, and Robert Whitaker, and then Sean Strickland. But let's go back to really a fight where I had recognized that Dricus du Plessis is no stranger to controversy. This fight right here with Dricus du Plessis against Yannick Bahati, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I'm going to show you the type of history that Dricus du Plessis has had in terms of really not being a stranger to controversy. Here we go.
They called it the most intense rivalry in EFC.
Did you see that? Let's play that again right here. So you see, this guy is no stranger to disrespect whatsoever. There is no strange, this is not a strange occurrence for him in any kind of way at all. Let's continue on.
They called it the most intense rivalry in EFC history.
And now Dricus du Plessis is going to be involved in another intense rivalry.
Is that I will gas, and my response was I told him, ask your girlfriend.
You heard that? He said, ask your girlfriend. So again, I'm trying to demonstrate to you guys that Dricus du Plessis has been here before in terms of dealing with a controversial fight.
When Bahati and du Plessis were scheduled to fight at EFC 62, things got very intense. Yannick ruthlessly trash-talked Dricus and even slapped him at the stare down.
What are you gonna do? You'll do nothing. I'm the king of South Africa, you know. I own that place, you know what I mean? I'm gonna walk in there like a king.
When they finally
So once again, I know that this is in the regional side of things. Does this look familiar to you guys? Does this look familiar to you? And by the way, obviously, this was the end result of that particular fight. Okay? This was the result of that particular fight. And so let's continue on right here.
it was an explosive fight.
Come on, touch gloves if you want it. We'll study your respectful corners.
Just can't believe they wouldn't touch gloves. It's such a surprise.
Wow.
So to fast forward,
Squeezing for all his worth.
He's a oh my God.
Kayak. Why do people use kayak to compare hundreds of travel sites at once? I don't.
He's got Bahati. He is the king of the middleweight. He took him out, and then himself the entry.
and that's right, insult to injury, as we've previously mentioned. So there we are, right? So once again, this is a man who's not really a stranger to this particular type of controversy, the lead up to that fight. And you got to imagine how big this was for South Africa at the time, right? And obviously, Dricus went on after that to take on Roberto Soldic in KSW. He had beaten him, and then Robert Soldic had beaten him also when KSW had a fight out in England. He then returned to the middleweight division, then went back to EFC, won the title down there, and then made his UFC debut as a result. So he has a loss over this guy right here. This is the guy that he had lost to. He has beaten him previously, but obviously this guy settled the score against him in that fight, in that KSW fight out in England. But nonetheless, this right here was the most memorable fight for Dricus du Plessis. His fight against Yannick.
Leopard slapping him in the face. My God. Dricus is the real deal. If you ever doubted it. But how do you struggling to actually get to his feet? And he's probably seconds from being choked completely unconscious. But you can see he was seconds from being choked unconscious. Squeezing, and eventually he had to give up. There was nowhere else to go.
So I got to tell you, with Dricus du Plessis, and by the way, if you guys are just watching this right now, I urge you to watch from the very beginning because I really go into the history of these two and I talk about the racial implications of this fight, which, by the way, I'm going to go into even more details about the apartheid from this point, right? But so far, I've been going over the kicks and the punches, the historical rivalry between him and Israel Adesanya, and not only that, the controversy that's surrounding this fight with the racial implications, and also doing a video that I've showed you that I did back in the summertime where I filmed it in Santa Monica, where I talked about the history of the apartheid and basically the history of these two and how all of this had started. So again, let me tell you guys why this particular fight is really, really controversial. Okay, because this right here is one of the arguments that Israel Adesanya has had. He's had this argument against Dricus du Plessis. He called him the C word, by the way. He called him a racker. And obviously, I'm trying to rhyme that word without actually saying it. But then also calls him the N word. Right? And what did Dana White say when they asked him about that? When he walked up to Dricus after his win, before all this, after his win with Robert Whittaker, what did they ask Dana White that night at the press conference? He asked him, hey, what do you think about Israel Adesanya using the N-word? You know what Dana White said? And by the way, a lot of people, especially in the right-wing community, really gave Dana his props when he said something to the effect of, well, what do you want me to say to Israel Adesanya? He's black. He's allowed to say it. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to get a little bit off topic here because I'm going to address the N-word, right? As somebody like myself who has North African ancestry, personally, I would never use the N-word. Okay? And if I did, it's only for a couple of reasons why I would ever use the N-word. For one, if let's say I'm quoting someone, like let's say Israel Adesanya, obviously look at the way that I did this picture right here. I didn't even put the actual word into it. I just literally used explicit and basically bleeping it out. And also, if I was to write it on text, I would have an emoji of a ninja. And by the way, if you're from the urban community, you know exactly what that means. So in other words, I don't use the word because, as you know, in my podcast and in my content that I do, I don't even really curse. And that's by design, only because I want to speak proper. I don't want to go outside of the lines of being a Muslim And being a Muslim means that you're going to speak proper, speak good. You're not going to use any foul language or anything like that. So that's just a trajectory that I'm at. So I'm just not going to use that word. But there are people out there, especially out here in California, who use the N word that are non black. So here's an example that I mean, right? There are Mexican rappers out here in California, right? There's a huge Chicano rap scene out here. There's this aspect of, well, you can't use the N word because it's just not what we do. It's disrespectful to black people to use it. So there's a strong majority of people in that particular musical genre of Chicano rap that don't use the N word as a result of that. But there is a new generation of Mexican rappers, Latino rappers that use the N word. Obviously, in the East Coast, it's probably a lot more prominent with the Puerto Ricans, with the Dominicans, and you can argue that they can get away with it because they are of black African descent. So it's okay for them to say it. And maybe even the Puerto Ricans as well. They're also mixed with Afro genes. So maybe it's okay for them to use it. But out here, there are white guys that grew up in the hood that are part of black gangs that use the N word. There are Asians out here in the West Coast that are part of black gangs or part of all Asian gangs, but adopted an African American culture and use the N word freely without any repercussions against them. And here's one example that I had mentioned previously before, right? And I think people in the hip hop world understand this. So there's this DJ named Ebro in New York City. And as you know, when it comes to New York City, they are a very racially charged environment, more so than California, with exactly the things that I had just mentioned, right? Because obviously it's a lot more diverse here in terms of the Asian and black relations, the black and Mexican relations, even though at times it can be very tumultuous in the gang world of Southern and Northern California. But nonetheless, Ebro had a problem with this rapper named Stupid Young, who, by the way, is from Long Beach, right? So, Stupid Young, for those of you that don't understand or know anything about the rap world, he is an Asian rapper affiliated with the Asian Boy Crips of Long Beach, because obviously Long Beach, it has a history of almost being a 100% Crip city, and one of the most famous Crips of them all in that particular part of the world, none other than Snoop Doggy Dogg. So obviously this particular Asian gang, the Asian Boy Crips that Stupid Young is a part of, they are black affiliated. Their rivals are the TRG, the Tiny Rascal gangs. They have a history that stems from Cambodia, moving out here and having to protect themselves against black and Latino gangs. And as a result, had to create their own faction. After a while, the TRG broke away. I'm sorry, the Asian boys had broke away from TRG, started their own gang, affiliated themselves with Filipino and black gangs, and as a result, sort of created and blended their own culture, which consists of using the N word. And I'm sure people of the Tiny Rascal gangs probably use the N word as well, because that just comes with the territory of that particular part of the world. But nonetheless, Ebro had a serious problem with a guy like that using the N word. Okay. So as a result, he wanted to cancel Stupid Young, but that wasn't the case, because obviously Stupid Young had a great career. He had made some great songs with Mozzie that went up to like 62 million views on YouTube, Mando, and a whole bunch of other hits, and now lives in Calabasas out in the hood. But that's neither here or there. So Dana White said that night, basically, after UFC 290, what are you going to say about Israel Adesanya using the N-word? Well, what am I supposed to say? He's black. He's allowed to say it. So once again, a lot of people felt really uncomfortable with this particular topic at hand, right? And why is that? Well, the reason why they felt so uncomfortable about this whole entire thing, as we're looking at what's leading up to this whole entire fight and Dricus du Plessis' victory, winning it for South Africa, claiming that he is the real African champion and the history of him dealing with controversies in his fight, going back to all of that, this is the reality of South Africa. They were an apartheid state, which you cannot deny. They've had areas in South Africa that were only exclusive for black people and white people, and obviously a segregated state at best, right? Literally, they had seats and benches on the streets that were exclusively only for Europeans. This is the reality of South Africa. So if Dricus du Plessis cannot understand why a lot of people are very much upset at this, and by the way, as an observer of this sport and as somebody that understands the fight business, I get it. Israel Adesanya is trying to sell tickets, but at the same time, you also can't really deduct his whole entire experience and say, well, he's only doing it for that. He might actually be truly triggered by all of this. Even though Israel Adesanya has never lived in South Africa, he's lived in Nigeria. And by the way, the circumstances that he's lived in Nigeria was based on the fact that he was a rich kid, right? So it wasn't like he was living in poverty of Nigeria, because guess what? In order for you to come to the United States, in order for you to come to New Zealand, in order for you to come to any Western state, you got to have money. They don't just let the Arabs of Lebanon. Okay, well, let me rephrase that. They did, only because there was war going on. But after a while, they wanted the immigrants that had professional skills, such as being doctors, lawyers, and whatnot. You couldn't just go to live in these countries without any professional settings behind you or a business that you can contribute to their economy. And by the way, speaking of that wealth that the Adesanya family had, they were about to move to America right before 9/11, but obviously they didn't want to do it because they felt that it was going to be a safety issue due to the recent terrorist attacks that have happened in 9/11, and thought that perhaps maybe America was not the safest place to go. So where did they go as a result? They went to New Zealand. Now, will you imagine, not to get off track off of this particular topic of the apartheid in South Africa, but could you imagine what would have happened if Israel Adesanya had lived in the United States? Maybe he would have been more of a wrestler, right? Maybe he would have had more of a grappling prowess rather than, let's say, the striking prowess of a Muay Thai fighter that he developed living in New Zealand under the Eugene Berman tutelage. But nonetheless, yes, that is the interesting history about Israel Adesanya and how he was transitioning from Nigeria to the Western world. In particular, perhaps maybe living in America rather than living in New Zealand, which would have altered the course of his life. But nonetheless, he became a star in New Zealand, became one of the biggest kickboxers in glory. And as a result, well, he put New Zealand on the map. And not only that, still managed to become an accepted figure in the American hip hop culture. But before all that, here's something you got to understand about the apartheid, right? Here's a book by John Allen. I'm going to give you a little synopsis on this book with the apartheid of South Africa, an insider's overview of the origins and effects of separate development. So this was developed and made in June of 2005. It was formally published. So although John was British born, he lived in South Africa somewhere from 1954 to 1990. And within that 36 period, which the country had experienced its more climatic and sometimes terrible events, okay, speaking from his own firsthand knowledge with intimate understanding of the situation, John Allen in this book takes you beyond the media hype that's so dominated by Western television screens to answer some of the most vital questions regarding the apartheid era. For example, who originated the system of government the world grew to hate so much? Was South Africa the only apartheid nation? Maybe not. You could argue Israel is right up there. And among other states around the world, did the economic sanctions have its desired effect? How did Washington's domestic agenda affect U.S. foreign policy? What was the West's real motive in forcing the country to its knees? Obviously, if you remember during the Margaret Thatcher era in England, she didn't want to do anything about the apartheid. So I urge you guys to take a look at that. Take a look at Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, who was the prime minister at the time, and her effects on that particular country, as opposed to the United States sort of pushing back on this issue. So, also, why did Nelson Mandela get released from prison? Okay, which exacerbated rather and diminished violence. Apartheid from South Africa addresses these and a host of other issues, bringing light to a little known concerning historical detail, providing you, the reader of this book, eyewitness accounts of day to day life in one of the most dangerous countries in the world. Okay. And I highly emphasize that particular point right there of the most dangerous country in the world, because guess what? Somebody like Dricus du Plessis, I got to tell you, let's talk skill now, right? And ability. Because a lot of the particular abilities that Dricus du Plessis has, it's quite unusual. See, many people sort of cite Dricus du Plessis as not looking very technical, not looking like the most crisp striker, sometimes not even the most really effective grappler. But I mean, really, he's really effective in grappling, right? He has a strength factor to him. But I want to talk about his unusual skills. Now, part of his unusual skills comes from the fact that he comes from a very dangerous area of the world. And by the way, a lot of fighters come from very dangerous areas of the world. Here's something you got to understand about white South Africans. They are constantly targeted. Do you guys remember that para-Olympian that was accused of shooting his girlfriend? Okay, you want to know why that happened? And I urge you guys to take a look at that. I don't remember the guy's name, nor do I really care to shout his name out, but look up South African para-Olympian who shot his girlfriend. And why is this significant to this story? Well, let me explain. South Africa is very dangerous. A lot of whites down in South Africa get robbed on a daily basis. You have to constantly watch your back, especially if you're white. Okay? So because of that, for one reason or another, he thought that his girlfriend may have been a robber, and as a result, pointed a gun and shot her, maybe by accident, but I urge you to take a look at the case to get full details of the entire matter at hand. So Dricus comes from this particular environment, a very tough environment, an environment where you have to really survive. Because just like what I told you, was it wrong that South Africa had all of these apartheid situations going on? 100%. This is wrong to the highest degree. But we also have to be objective and understand that it's not the fault of, let's say, the inherited party of these colonizers, which is who? Dricus du Plessis. Okay, now, should they apologize for this particular advantage that they have over the native Africans? Let me tell you, man, that's for your own opinion to decide, right? I could give you my own opinion on that matter, but man, it would just set the internet on fire and many people may not be able to handle it. But here's the thing, right? When you are living in the present moment that Dricus du Plessis is living right now, and people like him, they have to operate in the present moment, which means that if somebody's going to come after you, you have to defend yourself. So this is a very tough environment. Not only that, speaking of tough environment, they live in a very hot place, right? It's very hot. But not only is it hot, it also gives them an advantage because there's high elevation. Now, I urge you guys to take a look at MMA Guru, right? He went down to South Africa and trained. down there, right? He did a little boxing with Cameron Simon, showed him around the ropes, gave him a little pad lesson. And when MMA Guru went down there to do that pad lesson, he sort of started getting a little bit tired a whole lot easier because, again, this is what happens when you train in high elevation. So, put in perspective, this is a high elevated environment. Not only is it a high elevated environment, it is also an environment that is literally, how do I say this? Hot. So now you have to deal with building up your stamina. And by the way, very beneficial to your stamina. And I think this is the reason why Dricus du Plessis looks like the way that he does in his fights. It doesn't make sense. It looks sloppy, but it works because he comes from a tough environment, which, by the way, also sort of lends itself to the reason why he looks sloppy in the way that he does. Because when you're working in an environment where you're constantly tired and you're constantly hot and you get inside the cage, guess what? This is exactly how you're going to look like when you're in that fight. You're going to look like that because that's how you practiced. However, the beneficiary of being tough and being resilient is going to carry over in that cage as a result. So, once again, let's talk about the fight. Why this fight isn't happening. There's been several reasons why, right? For one, Dricus du Plessis refused the first time to fight. He refused. When he refused to fight, it was because he did not want to make a quick turnaround. Just like in January, he did not want to make a quick turnaround from January to July when they were supposed to fight at UFC 300. Now, let's go back in the summertime, 8 months ago. So, this is the post UFC 290 show. Well, not really, but this is after you post UFC 290. And I figured I just go do a prediction right now, an early prediction for Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. What exactly do I see here? Well, right now I'm currently listening to the press conference of Dricus du Plessis and what he thinks about his matchup with Israel Adesanya. And he says something to the effect that, well, take a look at my latest performance with Robert Whittaker as opposed to the latest performance of Israel Adesanya against Robert Whittaker. Now, here's the thing, is that Joe Rogan said something very interesting tonight, something to the effect where, you know what? If you're rematching a guy, you're going to be a little bit more reluctant in how you're going to throw your shots because of the fact that you know exactly what had gone on in the last fight with that guy and you know how powerful he is or how strong he is or something to that effect. Joe Rogan said this during the Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menefield fight. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know what, if you think about it, that's kind of the reason why Israel Adesanya was very reluctant against Robert Whittaker in their second fight. Now, reluctant in what sense? He knew that he could knock out Robert Whittaker, but could he do it again? That was the issue in and of itself. He was going to have a hard time doing that because obviously Robert Whittaker is very adaptable. He's very strong in his wrestling. He's got a lot of tools in his kit. So for him to go into that fight and just be the same sloppy Robert Whittaker that was in the 2019 fight with Israel Adesanya, it wasn't really going to go down like that. So of course, Israel Adesanya was going to have a harder fight, the second time around. So, in all honesty, look, I don't see Dricus winning at all. Why? Because look, here's the thing. What did I see tonight? Right? He's strong. He's got this natural gift of just strength, and you can feel it in his punches. You can feel it in his takedown attempts and his clinches, and he showed that against Robert Whittaker. The thing is, could he beat him? I don't think he can. And the reason why I don't think he can is because Israel Adesanya just has this type of style where not only is he very elusive, not only is he very long and tall, but he knows how to use all those things in a simultaneous motion that can outstrike anybody at any time. What does Dricus have to do to win this fight? Well, for one, he's got to try to out wrestle Israel Adesanya. He has to knock out Israel Adesanya in the same similar fashion that he finished Robert Whittaker with tonight. He hit him in the body, and then he went down, and then he went and finished him with a ground and pound. He needs to do something similar to that. But the thing is, how is he going to corner him? How is he going to trap him into a cage or into the ropes in the boxing terms? How is he going to do that? Because Israel Adesanya is a master of range, and he's got the height to do it. He's got the kickboxing experience. And it just seems like, in comparison to Dricus du Plessis, he seems green in comparison to Israel Adesanya, whereas Israel Adesanya seems to be this super veteran of the fight game. Well, the way that I see this is that, once again, I just don't see how Dricus is going to win this in any way. But once again, this is only the early predictions, and they call it the theater of the unknown. So you never know what's going to happen in these fights. But in the meantime, enjoy the ones that are coming before that, and then enjoy it when it comes. Enjoy your night and enjoy the fights. And enjoy Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya that's going to happen. I can't wait for it. I don't think Dricus can win. But once again, that's why they call it the theater of the unknown, right? I mean, we don't watch these fights just based on the fact that, okay, we already know what's going to happen. The truth is, we don't know what's going to happen. That's why we watch them. And that is the beauty of the theater of the unknown. Now, I got to be honest with you. Maybe I've changed my pick ever since then. Why? Only because of this particular fight right here with Sean Strickland. What I saw Sean Strickland do against Izzy, but also what I saw Dricus du Plessis do to Sean Strickland, I think could make the difference. So why am I changing my tune now from 8 months ago as opposed to now when it comes to, let's say, my particular prediction in this fight? I'm not saying that Dricus will win, but I think that there's a higher chance that he could win just based on the wrestling alone. You see, Sean is an amazing striker, right? And he proved that against Israel Adesanya, who we thought at the time was really the best striker in mixed martial arts. But now I think the way that Dricus has this insane attributes and ability to be able to turn it on and turn up the pace, especially in the wrestling department, could present a lot of problems for Israel Adesanya. On the other hand, Israel Adesanya has now taken a real significant amount of rest to where perhaps his performance could really become a whole lot more improved than, let's say, in the Sean Strickland fight. So in turn, not only do we have a fight that is 50-50, okay, but we also have a fight where these two guys are going to fight at their absolute best. Now, here's the thing about this, right? As I previously mentioned, that this fight was supposed to happen 2 times. And twice already, Dricus du Plessis had ducked this particular fight. And maybe for the better. And I'm going to explain why after this video. Why I think that it was better for Dricus du Plessis now that I'm really doing this video live in real time right now. And as I'm explaining this, I'm going to tell you some of the revelations that's coming in my head right now, why it was actually good that Dricus refused this fight twice, and why it was also good for Israel Adesanya to take the amount of rest that he truly deserves right now. So watch this. One month ago, I made this video. So Dricus du Plessis has refused to fight Israel Adesanya in UFC 300, and we got to ask the question, is this smart or is this cowardice? Now, most MMA channels are going to do one or the other. In other words, They're going to give you the hot take in order to garner attention. And sometimes that may not be the most accurate type of news corresponding that you could get out of a content creator. Now, why is that? Because there's multiple layers that you have to understand and nuances into these situations that are not often talked about. And quite frankly, many of them are not sensationalized enough for you to garner your attention. So hopefully, this objective take, looking at it from both sides of the aisle, can give you a better insight on what exactly is happening here and why, for the second time around, Dricus du Plessis has refused to fight with Israel Adesanya. First as a challenger, now as a title holder and the current undisputed champion of the 185 division. So with that in mind, is it cowardice for him to not take this fight, knowing that for 5 rounds he went in there with Sean Strickland, threw about 100 punches, probably took 100 punches. Obviously, this is not an accurate metric. I'm giving you guys an exaggeration to, once again, sensationalize your mind into trying to understand the severity of this particular situation. But that's the reality of it. Now, a lot of guys will take a very methodical route in terms of the matchmaking and the matches that they are willing to take and the matches that they are willing to answer to. For example, John Jones has fought Chael Sonnen. We all know this. He's beaten him in the first round and dominated him with ease. However, what we don't know is prior to that, especially if you're not a hardcore, long-time MMA fan, you didn't know that an entire fight card was canceled primarily because of John Jones and Chael Sonnen and refusing to fight Chael Sonnen as a result of a short notice type of scenario. In other words, he was scheduled to fight Dan Henderson, which, by the way, would have been a great matchup, would have been a great resume for John Jones in the process of that. But the man got injured, and hence, here comes Chael Sonnen stepping in on a short day's notice. By the way, John Jones refused. You want to know why? Well, first off, let's try to look at who John Jones is in the present time. And I'm not talking about the opinions that people have of him when it comes to Tom Aspinall and things of that nature. I'm talking about his overall career. Undeniable, the man has a great resume. He's got a great legacy. And you want to know why? Well, for one, he didn't go out and take the fights that he knew he couldn't win, or fights that were just on a short notice, such as dangerous opponents like Chael Sonnen back in the days in his prime, especially when he didn't train for him in the kind of way that he trained for Dan Henderson. Maybe perhaps he knew that Dan Henderson was not going to be as wrestling heavy, even though he is a wrestler like Chael Sonnen, but won't use it as much as he will. So he had to prepare for that. And the second time around, when he actually did have a real scheduled bout with Chael Sonnen, what had happened in the process? He took him down with ease, just like what he did in the Cyril Gahn fight in recent times, and ground and pounded him. Obviously, he didn't do that to Cyril Gahn. Well, he did, but then he submitted him. But with Chael Sonnen, he just beat him down to the ground, Khabib style, and that was that. That was that, all in the history books, and his resume remained intact. Well, now fast forward to 2024, a lot of guys are not doing anything different. You see, we come from a sport that has sort of a lineage in wrestling. And if you know anything about wrestling, for those that have wrestled in high school, for all my alumni out there and all those that have gone through the wrestling rooms and all the practices and all these things, you know that in wrestling, you don't know who you're going to face. You are going to face random people. You could fight probably some of the worst guys in the state, or you can fight a state champion all within a week's notice, or not even. And that's the culture of wrestling. And all of that has bled over into mixed martial arts. But the problem is, mixed martial arts is a professional setting. Not only is it a professional setting, if you're at a certain level, there are certain legacies that you want to remain intact in order to build your brand outside of your fight career, so that you can monetize your image and your whole entire brand as a whole, which is why certain guys are going to take calculative decisions in certain instances when it comes to taking short notice fights. Now, here's the thing. Is it cowardice of Dricus du Plessis to do that, considering that he's had injuries after injuries, and then on top of that, he just came from a 5-round fight only to turn around within a 3-month span, not have the time to recover while trying to peak for another fight? I mean, look, to each his own. Look at Israel Adesanya. This guy has been active. He's claimed that he's been in fights where he was injured and still walked in there and did the damn thing. But the problem is not every fighter is the same. Not every fighter has the same career trajectory, and not every fighter is going to make the same amount of choices that the other guys will, or the same amount of risk that one guy over the other will. And one thing that you got to understand is that no matter what decisions any of these guys make, you have to respect it either way. I'm going to tell you why. Because number one, if they don't choose to take that fight because they want to have their legacy remain intact, well, guess what? They are also doing something very good for the business, for the industry of mixed martial arts, because they are saving themselves to build an even bigger fight down the road so that we can have these great matches, these great events. For example, take Max Holloway. He recently took a fight with Justin Gaethje. And by the way, with many experts and pundits in the sport, the one thing that we all can agree on is that Max Holloway is going to take a serious amount of damage going into this fight and perhaps may have missed out on the opportunity of having a new champion at 145, such as Ilya Tapora. Now, why is that? For one, you got to understand something. Max Holloway has fought Volkanovski several times, okay? And a lot of those were controversial, but nonetheless, Volkanovski came out on top in those situations. And as a result, the one thing you have to understand is that now he's lost an opportunity because Volkanovski remains on top. Well, now here's this new superstar, Ilya Tapora, who has just beaten Volkanovski, knocked him out, and Max Holloway has an opportunity to get in there and possibly prove that he is the best 145 fighter in the world. But now all of that is going to be delayed because of the damage that Justin Gaethje will give you. And anybody who knows anything about mixed martial arts knows that when you're in a fight with Justin Gaethje, you are in for a violent scrap that could be life-altering, career-altering, and everything in between. So, once again, this is the matters of choices that these guys make in order to fill up a card. And quite frankly, you can't blame certain guys for making certain decisions. Now, if you are those guys that do take the short notice fights, that do take the tough fights under undesirable circumstances to your favor, well, guess what? You got to love this too. You have to love this decision as much as you love the guy that's willing to keep his legacy intact. Because guess what? For these same reasons, you had Kamaru Usman step in there against Khamzat Chimaev on 11 days' notice. What did we get out of that? A great fight. For the same reason, in that same card, that Volkanovski stepped in there against Islam Makhachev, only for him to get knocked out. But in the process, if you're an Islam Makhachev fan, you could appreciate it because now it made Islam Makhachev look really good. Who would have thought that Islam Makhachev could score a head kick knockout? So that's the reality of this whole thing. So you can either call one guy a coward or you can call one guy being smart as trying to keep his legacy intact. But either way, I think that if you really believe that a person is a coward for not taking a fight and you put it out there on social media and you put it out there as a content creator, guess what? I'm sorry to tell you, you're doing it for sensationalized reasons. And if you are the guy that respects the guy who manages to want to keep his legacy intact by not taking these undesirable matches, well, you're a true fan of that particular person. But the fact of the matter is, are you really a true fan of the sport? And I think that these are the nuances that not many people are going to talk about because, quite frankly, they're too complicated. And not only are they too complicated, but they are also, quite frankly, not exciting for the minds of people that want the trash talk and want the big headlines or the titles on the screen that screams out, hey, this is drama and attention that you have to watch. But I hope with the truth and the nuances and the different varying layers of this particular matter that I'm explaining to you, I hope that that has given you some kind of sensation, that's giving you some sort of satisfaction in what it is that you're looking for when it comes to finding out answers or the type of content that is honest with everything and holds no punches in the truth and doesn't really care about whether it's sensationalized or not. Of course, I care that I want to entertain fans, that I want to entertain people from around the world with making a video. But I also want to remain and give you guys a sense of integrity in terms of letting you know the truth about everything. Because not everything is all good and not everything is all bad. Just like life, everything is in between. And I hope I can be in your life when you like and subscribe to these particular channels, because I'm going to give you guys the best content, but not only that, the most honest content that any YouTuber out there can give you. So I hope that you enjoyed. All right. So to address that question with No Chill MMA, the fight has been announced for UFC 305, which is going to take place in Perth, Australia. And this is via bjpen.com. By the way, it's set for October 18th at the Rack Center in Perth, Australia. And again, it has been reported to be in discussions. And the reason why I played that video is because you got to understand, right? Dricus du Plessis has refused that fight twice now. And the reason why I played that video is to address and tell you guys that, well, for one, I played a video earlier, if you weren't here, where I was in Southern California, where I had covered that fight. It was this particular video right here. It was an early prediction that I had made simply just right after. This is the post UFC 290 show. Right here. It was in this. Really, but this is after you post UFC 290. And I figured So I played that video earlier. Go check that video out, or you can just rewind it and watch the entire thing here. And the reason why I played that video earlier and in the one where I was in the car was because in the early predictions that I had made for this video right here, prediction for Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya, what exactly do I see here? Well, right now I'm currently listening to the press conference of Dricus du Plessis and what he thinks about his matchup with Israel Adesanya. And he says something to the effect that, well, take a look at my latest performance with Robert Whittaker as opposed to the latest performance of Israel Adesanya against Robert Whittaker. Now, here's the thing, is that Joe Rogan said something very interesting tonight, something to the effect where, you know what? If you're rematching a guy, you're going to be a little bit more reluctant in how you're going to throw your shots because of the fact that you know exactly what had gone on in the last fight with that guy, and you know how powerful he is or how strong he is or something to that effect. Joe Rogan said this during the Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menefield fight. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know what, if you think about it, that's kind of the reason why Israel Adesanya was very reluctant against Robert Whittaker. All right, so to make long story short, when I did that video, I had basically explained to people that I think Israel Adesanya was going to win that fight easily. based on just the sloppiness that I saw out of Dricus du Plessis. But if you rewind back to this video, I also talk about why Dricus du Plessis is such a tough guy, the type of environment that he lives at, and the tumultuous nature of the environment in which he lives as a white South African, constantly having to defend himself. Right. So I decided to play the other video where I was in the car and I explained to you why Dricus du Plessis has now refused this fight. So now here I am. I'm going to explain to you why I played those two videos and why my mind is sort of changing a little bit in the direction of Dricus du Plessis. And also why I think this is going to be an even harder fight based on the decisions that they've made. So Israel Adesanya, as you know, I've explained in the beginning of the stream that Israel Adesanya has had this long, grinding schedule from one fight after another, right? Now, it was great for him to be able to build all these championship experiences, but at one point, he needed to rest, which is what he's doing right now. With Dricus du Plessis, he refused this fight twice. He refused it in September because it was too quick of a turnaround going from July to September. And the magnitude of a high-level fight like that, he needed a whole lot more in order for him to get ready. So he refused that one. All of a sudden, Sean Strickland gets the title shot, right? It's Sean Strickland who gets the title shot right after Dricus won his fight, after Israel Adesanya avenged his loss against Alex Pereira. And then as a result, Sean Strickland upsets the entire party, destroys this big marquee matchup. By the way, a matchup that is filled with controversy. Okay, instead of fighting a guy that he accuses of being a racist, he ends up fighting a guy who was a former racist, only for that former controversial racist to win, and only for that guy to become a former champion himself, and for Dricus to now be in this spot. So now fast forward, Dricus du Plessis, after he wins the title, was told, hey, we need you for UFC 300. Because obviously, the way that UFC 300 is going, they wanted to build some sort of card that was Marvel versus DC, King Kong versus Godzilla. And what better King Kong versus Godzilla fight that you could have than having these two go up against each other in the controversy that is surrounding this fight? But lo and behold, Dricus, he refuses the fight because, once again, it's too much of a quick turnaround, and he's suffered some injuries, maybe in training or while during the Sean Strickland fight. And so now they just decided, you know what? Let's do this in August. So with that, with the accumulation of the rest that Israel Adesanya has now had and the time off that he's been able to experience, going into UFC 305 per Australia, I think is going to be very effective for both of them. Dricus healed up, well rested. Israel Adesanya healed up and well rested. So as a result, this fight is going to be a whole lot bigger, a whole lot better. And not only that, really, just a whole lot more beneficial for both men, which is why we're going to see a 50-50 fight. Now, as I've mentioned and said previously, I said that at first I'm going to go with Israel Adesanya, just based on the fact that he looked like a real unbeatable champion at the time. Yes, he got beaten by Alex Pereira, but it shows that he can create some adjustments. And perhaps maybe him getting knocked out by Alex Pereira was just based on this constant activity that he had going on, to which he had no rest from. So now he goes into the Sean Strickland fight, probably not as well rested as he should have, and that's the reason why he performed the way that he did and lost. And now, obviously, Dricus wins that fight against Sean, and here we are. So he refuses the fight twice, only for both of them to perhaps benefit from this rest and also benefit from refusing those fights previously. Because once again, that video that I had played for you, it's like the question of whether you want to be a tough guy or whether you want to, I don't know, be a guy that has a legitimate legacy that people can look back with a winning track record. Because that's all that people really look at by the end of the day. Sure, people are going to call you a coward in hindsight, but in reality, look at John Jones, right? He refused the fight against Dan Henderson. That fight never happened. Dan Henderson never got his shot against John Jones. Chael Sonnen wanted to step in. John Jones refused. Later on, he ended up fighting Chael Sonnen, blew him out the water, beat him decisively because of the preparation that he had going into that fight. So that's something to consider, right? And this is a reason why I say that this fight, not only will it become one of the most racially charged fights ever, based on the history that they have going on and based on the history that Dricus du Plessis has, and based on the history of these two men and the regions that they come from. And by the way, here's something you got to understand about Dricus du Plessis, as I've mentioned, right? Look at this. This guy is a double champion in the EFC organization. He was also a champion at KSW, a Polish organization. This man is no stranger to being a world champion. But guess what? Neither is Adesanya. He's not a stranger to any of this as well. And I think that this is the perfect time for them to have been able to set up a fight like this. A perfect time. Because all things aligned. Right? Dricus beats Robert Whittaker. Nobody would have expected that. Just like nobody would have expected him to become a double champion when he was in the EFC or the KSW. But the truth is, nobody really expects anything of you when you start out your career. It is only then when you start building up, people start realizing, you know what? There's something to this guy. There's some real potential in this guy. As soon as you start winning, accumulating wins after wins after wins. And now we're at the right place and at the right time. I told you in the summer that I had thought that Dricus is going to lose to Israel Adesanya. Now I don't know. I'm leaning towards 50-50 with a slight towards Dricus du Plessis, just based on just everything that I've seen and everything that he's proven from now till then on. And with Israel Adesanya, he also has a high potential of winning this fight, based on the fact that he's now well rested, which is, by the way, very important. Okay, it's great to have activity, and he's accumulated that with all of his championship fights that he's had in the UFC, and also a lot of his high-profile fights in kickboxing. It's great that he was able to accumulate all that. But now it was time to rest. With Dricus, it was time for him to refuse those fights and take this fight at the right time. Why did the UFC want Dricus to go and fight Israel Adesanya coming from July, going into September at a short notice like that? Why did they want to do that? Well, for one, they wanted to fill up that card in Sydney, because obviously they are trying to build even their higher potential in the Australian market, just like what they're going to do with Perth, which is where this fight is taking place. Okay, they were trying to do that. They had a Sydney card. They needed an Australian or New Zealand champion, which was Israel Adesanya. And as a result, they weren't able to get that fight. So guess what? Sean Strickland was like, hey, you want to step in? Sure. And lo and behold, we found out Sean Strickland had a big following in Australia. However, unfortunately, that whole entire fight ruined the plans of the UFC to put Israel Adesanya against Dricus du Plessis, only for Sean Strickland to come back and fight Dricus du Plessis. and for Dricus du Plessis to lose that sort of give the universe back to its rightful course. Because why I say that, it just built up to this. Now we have that fight that we've been looking for in the first place. The only difference is that now the roles are reversed. After all of that, the roles are reversed where Sean Strickland lost his belt, and now Dricus du Plessis is the champion, while Israel Adesanya is the contender. And this is the fight that we've always wanted in the first place, just not in this circumstance. We sort of wanted it in a circumstance where Israel Adesanya was the champion, and for Dricus to fight this popular champion with this controversy behind it. But now the roles are reversed, and either way, we're getting the fight that we've always wanted. And going back to the Yannick fight in the EFC, where Yannick was talking about Dricus's girl slapping him before the weigh-ins and things of that nature, he's not a stranger to controversial fights. But in the midst of not a stranger to controversial fights, he's also not a stranger to a dangerous environment where it's, quite frankly, really dangerous for white people to live in South Africa. And also the history that is behind that country, in which he has to answer for in this modern cancel culture. But also in the midst of that, Dricus du Plessis is not a stranger to championship fights, as you can see in his pre-UFC career. So that's what we have going on. We have a fight that these guys are coming in at the right place and at the right time. Because had you done those fights before that, we wouldn't have all these months and all these crazy events that had followed in between that to have what we have right now in this UFC 305 in Perth. So originally, they wanted to bring in Dricus to fight in Sydney because they are trying to fill up an Australian card. They're trying to build up an Australian market that they already have built up over the years. Well, now it's coming back in full circle. The original plan was in Australia, but now the fight is going to be in Australia, but in a different city, from Sydney to Perth. The original plan was supposed to be Israel Adesanya as the world champion and Dricus du Plessis as the upcoming contender, former two-weight champion in multiple organizations, challenging one of the most popular champions of all time in UFC. But now the roles are reversed. It is now Dricus du Plessis that is the champion, and Israel Adesanya as the contender. A contender, by the way, that is coming off a loss. So this is the next topic that I wanted to get to before we end our 2-hour mark in this particular content. Is this fight less valuable now that Israel Adesanya is coming in as a contender that came off of a loss? And by the way, it's not like the Sean Strickland fight, because the Sean Strickland fight, I got to tell you, that was close. Many people could easily have scored that for Sean. Now, me personally, I think Dricus had won that fight. Maybe I'm biased because I've wrestled before and I sort of favor guys that wrestle, and I think that you need to have wrestling in order to succeed in mixed martial arts. Sure, maybe I have a technical bias in that particular instance, right? But again, wrestling wins fights. Wrestling is an important factor of mixed martial arts. And Sean Strickland did none of that. But nonetheless, a lot of people can argue and say that he won that fight. It's okay. You're allowed to have that opinion. But because of that opinion, I think sort of diminishes this rematch. Only because of the performance that Israel Adesanya had against Sean Strickland. It was a one-side beatdown. I'm going to be honest with you. That fight, I didn't see one round that Israel Adesanya had won. Not one. Every round, I was like, wow, Sean is really doing it. Round 1, Sean's really doing it. Round 2, Sean's really doing it. Round 3, Sean is going to win this fight. Round 4, Sean, all he has to do is not get knocked out, and he did it. Round 5, all he's got to do is survive. He's going to be world champion. Lo and behold, Sean Strickland becomes the world champion. After becoming the world champion, once again, we've lost a big marquee fight. But what does Israel Adesanya do afterwards? Because again, I'm still on the topic of whether this fight is going to be valuable or not, considering that he had lost. Now, I can make excuses and say he was just really burnt out from doing all of these fights back to back, and he needed this rest. Thank you, D Brown. Another great segment. Oh, yes. Probably one of my best, content so far. And I'm glad that you're a part of it. Glad that you shared some comment into this and contributed to the stream. So Sean Strickland is now the world champion at that time, right? And Israel Adesanya decided to take a rest for the betterment of his performance going into this fight with Dricus du Plessis, which is why I emphasize over and over again why this fight is going to be 50-50 as opposed to during the summertime when I sort of had a one-way prediction into how this fight is going to go. I had Israel Adesanya winning this fight all the way, but this particular fight with Sean Strickland changed that. And then what happened? What did Dricus do to Sean Strickland? He cut him up, but he got cut up as well. They went and banged, fought each other Mexican style, close range. But Dricus had the better wrestling. And because he had the better wrestling, that is the reason why the judges in Toronto gave him that fight. A lot of people were saying that, well, it's because Sean Strickland was being too much of a MAGA guy. He was too controversial. He was too hateful. And Canada is a hyper-liberal country, so therefore they're going to give him the nod or not give him the nod as a result. No, it had nothing to do with that. I saw the fight and it went down the way that it did. Dricus had won fair and square and did something that Israel Adesanya wasn't able to do. However, as great as the fact that Israel Adesanya now has taken this well-needed rest and making this a 50-50 fight, the question now is this fight more or less valuable considering that Israel Adesanya is coming off of a loss? And there's two ways that I can look at it, right? I'm going to give you the two schools of thought in this particular instance. For one, I think there is an aspect to where this fight is devalued because of his loss. And who's going to look at it like that? Maybe the casuals. Or the other side of that, because we don't know what people are thinking in their minds, especially on a Saturday night where this fight is about to happen and you have a choice of either hitting that pay-per-view button or not hitting that pay-per-view button to subscribe to this particular fight and to pay your $89 to watch this pay-per-view. You're going to say to yourself, well, you know what? It's Israel Adesanya. It doesn't matter if he came off of a loss. Just like Conor McGregor, when he comes back, you guys know that this fight is going to be probably one of the biggest fights ever that the UFC does because Conor does big numbers and he's coming off of 2 losses. But this fight is a little bit different. You see, some guys, their whole entire product is really about winning. And if you're not winning, you're not going to get paid the way that you should, or you're not going to garner the hype, the attention, and the clout that you normally would get if you stay winning. Just like John Jones. John Jones, his whole entire career is about winning. Floyd Mayweather, his whole entire career is about winning. And if you don't win, then you don't matter. But for some reason, somebody like Conor McGregor, It almost doesn't matter whether he wins or loses. You know who else is like that? Sean Strickland. It doesn't matter if he wins or he loses. And by the way, he lost that fight convincingly, in my humble opinion. In my humble opinion and my own judgment, and just what I saw from that fight live as I was concentrating round by round, really analyzing it for what it was. He lost that fight. But guess what? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter that he lost that fight. Why? I'm going to tell you why it didn't matter that Sean Strickland lost that fight against Dricus. Because his next fight is still going to be big based on the fact that Sean Strickland has made himself into the Stone Cold Steve Austin of MMA. The Stone Cold Steve Austin of MMA. Did you care that Stone Cold Steve Austin got submitted by Bret Hart? He was sitting at the sharpshooter with his face bloodied up, just like Sean Strickland. You want to talk about bloodied up? Okay, look at this. Bloodied up. That's what Bret the Hitman Hart made Stone Cold Steve Austin look in that submission match that Ken Shamrock was the guest referee at. But guess what? As a result of that, it made Stone Cold Steve Austin even bigger. And to all the right-wing MAGA guys out there that watched Sean Strickland in that fight, it made him bigger because now in their minds, they thought that the judges had screwed him. And it made him a folk hero. So guys like Sean, it doesn't matter whether they win or they lose. But with Israel Adesanya, doesn't matter that he wins or loses. At one point of his career, it did. When he was undefeated and nobody could beat him, it mattered. It mattered that he was an undefeated champion. It mattered that he was going to retire undefeated. Even Khabib, I think his whole entire premise of being a superstar is predicated on the fact that he's undefeated, but also had a harsh nemesis and really a formidable rival in Conor McGregor in terms of promotion, which helped his next two or his last two fights after that, to where he can just be himself now, concentrate on the fight, doing what he does best, which is win. But I got to tell you, after really analyzing it as I'm talking about it, this is what I realized. I don't think that it matters that Israel Adesanya is coming off of a loss going into this fight with Dricus du Plessis. And I'm going to tell you why. I think that ever since Israel Adesanya had lost to Jan Blachowicz and then came back, dominated the 185 division in which he was already a sitting champion at while he was trying to go for the double belt at 205, people started to notice, you know what? He's human. But that humanizing of a fighter, i.e. them losing, I think is sometimes what really makes a lot of fighters even more lovable. Ricky Hatton is a great example of that. He got slept by Manny Pacquiao. Before that, he got slept by Floyd Mayweather. But all of a sudden, people were okay with it, and they sort of still embraced him. Israel Adesanya, the same thing. People forget that Alex Pereira fight, or maybe they didn't forget. The fact that he had lost to Alex Pereira several times in kickboxing. And then he comes into MMA, Alex Pereira, with the one sole mission of defeating Israel Adesanya. And as a result, he did. And it was a big downfall for Israel Adesanya. People made fun of him. People made memes about him. But here's something that I understand about the mixed martial arts community, as well as the American fan base, if not just the whole entire international mixed martial arts fan base. They love a good comeback story more than boxing. Of course, in boxing, they still love a good comeback story. That's why Derek Chisora, Ricky Hatton, all these guys that have already lost before can still be popular. But maybe that's just a British thing. Maybe they just love their guys no matter what. And maybe they love them even more when they lose because they can relate to how do I say this, going through downfalls, especially when you come from a very tough economic environment like that, where people just want to constantly hold you down. So the value of this fight, even though Israel Adesanya is coming off of a loss, is higher than ever. He's already lost. He's already lost again. But now he's coming back even more improved. And from the perspective of the hardcore fans such as myself, I think that this rest was something that he truly needed. Just like Dricus du Plessis really needed this particular rest in order for him to fight at his best when they meet in this particular date of August 18th for the Perth card in UFC 305. So in other words, what I'm really trying to tell you guys is that some fighters, it really doesn't matter whether they win or they lose. And at one point, it did matter for Israel Adesanya. But I'm going to end it with this, and I want you guys to like and subscribe when I get out of here. This is the reason why this fight is going to be big, because of the racial implications, because of the history and the back and forth that these two guys have been dealing with. But not only that, more importantly, me ending this segment with letting you understand that fans in the mixed martial arts world today love a good comeback story. And this is Israel Adesanya's opportunity to do exactly that, whether he won or he lost in his last outing. Don't forget to like and subscribe.